Logan Reed stood frozen outside the emergency room entrance, his daughter's hand trembling in his own, when he saw her, the woman from the cafe 3 weeks ago. The woman who'd unknowingly changed everything. Maya Collins wasn't wearing scrubs this time. She was wearing the same devastated expression he'd carried for 5 years. Their eyes met across the automatic doors, and in that split second, Logan understood. Some meetings aren't accidents. Some connections are designed by people who see what we're too afraid to admit, that we're drowning, and we've convinced ourselves it's the same as swimming. If you're watching this, stay until the very end, because this story isn't just about love. It's about the terrifying choice between surviving and actually living. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from, and let's see how far this story travels. Now let me take you back to where it all began. The morning Mrs. Huang died, Logan Reed didn't know she was dying. He knew she was sick. Everyone on Lakeview Drive knew that much. The yellow house with the wind chimes had grown quieter over the past 6 months, the garden less tended, the curtains drawn more often than not. But Mrs. Huang had a way of deflecting concern with the same efficiency she'd once used to organize the neighborhood watch meetings and coordinate the annual block party. She was fine, she'd insist, waving away questions with flour-dusted hands or a gardening trowel, just getting older, nothing dramatic. Logan had believed her because it was easier than the alternative. It was a Tuesday in late September when she cornered him, a warm afternoon with that particular quality of light that makes everything look temporary, like a photograph already fading. Logan had been carrying lumber from his truck to the detached garage he'd converted into a workshop, his daughter Zoe trailing behind him with a bag of sandpaper and paintbrushes, when Mrs. Huang appeared at the fence that separated their properties. "Logan, dear, do you have a moment?" He set down the wood, wiping sawdust from his hands. "Of course, Mrs. Huang. Everything okay?" She smiled, but there was something calculated in it, something that made Logan's internal warning system flicker to life. Mrs. Huang was many things, kind, generous, occasionally intrusive in the way elderly neighbors are permitted to be, but she was never calculated. "I need a favor," she said, her accent still carrying the cadence of her childhood in Taiwan despite 50 years in America. "A friend of mine needs help moving some furniture, heavy pieces." I told her I knew someone strong and reliable. Logan glanced at Zoe, who was examining a beetle on the fence post with the intense focus only 7-year-olds can muster. "I can probably help this weekend. What day works?" Actually, she was hoping to meet you first to discuss details. This Thursday, perhaps, around 2 o'clock at the Riverside Cafe downtown? Something about the specificity made Logan pause. The Riverside Cafe wasn't where people discussed furniture moving. It was where people went on dates, with its lakefront windows and its unnecessarily complicated coffee menu and its acoustic guitar music floating through speakers designed to sound casual but probably cost more than Logan's truck. "Mrs. Huang. She's very particular about her furniture," Mrs. Huang continued, her expression innocent in a way that was absolutely not innocent. Antiques, mostly. She wants to make sure whoever helps her understands how to handle delicate pieces. "You do such beautiful restoration work, Logan. I showed her that table you refinished for me, and she was very impressed." Logan studied her face, trying to determine if this was what he suspected it was. Mrs. Huang had been hinting, gently, then less gently, for months that he should meet someone. Not for anything serious, she'd always clarified. Just for coffee. Just to remember what adult conversation felt like. Just to prove to himself that his heart hadn't completely calcified in the 5 years since the accident. "This is about furniture?" he asked carefully. "Of course it's about furniture." Mrs. Huang's eyes sparkled with something that might have been mischief or might have been medication-induced delirium. It was genuinely hard to tell. "What else would it be about?" Logan opened his mouth to argue, then caught sight of Zoe watching them both with her too perceptive gaze, the one that saw through adult pretenses with uncomfortable accuracy. He couldn't have this conversation here, now, with his daughter absorbing every word and storing it away for later analysis. "Fine," he said, defeated. "Thursday at 2. "But Mrs. Huang, if this is—" "Wear something nice," she interrupted, already turning back toward her house. "First impressions matter in business." "It's about furniture," Logan called after her. "That's what I said." She disappeared through her back door, leaving Logan standing in his driveway with the distinct feeling he'd just been manipulated by a master. Zoe looked up at him. "Is Mrs. Huang trying to get you a girlfriend?" "No," Logan said automatically, then reconsidered. Lying to Zoe never worked. "Maybe. Probably. I don't know." "You should go anyway," Zoe announced, returning her attention to the beetle. "You never go anywhere except work and my school and the grocery store. It's boring." "I'm not boring. I'm responsible." "You can be both." Logan picked up the lumber again, unsettled by his 7-year-old's casual psychological assessment. "When did you get so wise?" "I watch a lot of educational television while you're sanding furniture," Zoe replied matter-of-factly. Thursday arrived with the inevitability of a bill coming due. Logan spent the morning refinishing a dresser for a client across town, then picked up Zoe from school, dropped her at his sister Rachel's house, which required enduring 20 minutes of Rachel's enthusiastic interrogation about this mysterious coffee date, and found himself parking outside the Riverside Cafe 15 minutes early, palms sweating like a teenager. This was ridiculous. He was 34 years old. He'd survived loss that would have broken most people. He'd learned to braid hair and navigate parent-teacher conferences and explain menstruation in age-appropriate terms because Zoe had asked during a car ride, and he'd nearly driven off the road. He could handle coffee with a stranger. Except it wasn't just coffee with a stranger. It was the first time in 5 years he'd agreed to anything remotely resembling a date, and the weight of that realization made his chest feel tight. The cafe was exactly as he remembered from the single time he'd been there years ago. All exposed brick and reclaimed wood, the kind of place that tried very hard to look like it wasn't trying at all. Large windows overlooked the lake, where afternoon light scattered across the water in patterns that would have been beautiful if Logan had been capable of appreciating beauty without immediately thinking about how temporary it was. He ordered black coffee from a barista with a nose ring and an expression of profound disinterest, then claimed a table by the window, positioning himself so he could see the entrance. The plan was simple: wait 15 minutes, determine if this woman showed up, make polite conversation about furniture for exactly 30 minutes, then escape back to his real life where expectations were manageable and emotions stayed buried. 2 o'clock came and went. Logan checked his phone. No messages. He sipped his coffee, which tasted like it had been brewed by someone with strong opinions about ethical bean sourcing. Around him, the cafe hummed with the sounds of people whose lives apparently included time for mid-afternoon coffee dates, laptops clicking, quiet conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine creating a soundtrack of normalcy Logan no longer felt part of. By 2:15, he was equal parts relieved and irritated. Relieved because this ridiculous setup could end without the actual awkwardness of interaction. Irritated because he'd put on clean jeans and his least-worn shirt and told Rachel he was putting himself out there, and now he'd have to admit this had been exactly the waste of time he'd predicted. He was gathering his jacket at 2:20 when the door opened. The woman who rushed in looked nothing like what Logan had been expecting. Not that he'd been expecting anything specific, but if he had been, it wouldn't have been this. She was still in scrubs, dark blue and wrinkled, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that had mostly given up, and there was something exhausted in her face that went beyond simple tiredness. She scanned the cafe with an expression caught between hope and resignation. Then her eyes landed on Logan. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she walked over, and Logan noticed the details. The ID badge still clipped to her scrubs that read Maya Collins, RN, Hospice Care. The shadows under her eyes that suggested sleep was something other people did. The way she carried herself like someone who'd learned to function on reserves that had been depleted long ago. "Are you Logan?" Her voice was quiet but steady. "I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm still in my scrubs. I didn't have time to change. I was supposed to be off at 1, but..." She stopped, seeming to recalibrate. "I'm Maya, Mrs. Huang's friend." Logan stood because his mother had raised him with manners that persisted even in surreal situations. "It's fine. I just got here myself." It was a lie, and from the way Maya's expression flickered, she knew it. But she didn't call him on it. Instead, she dropped into the chair across from him like gravity had increased specifically for her, then immediately stood back up. "I should order something. Do you need anything?" "I'm good," Logan said, gesturing to his half-empty cup. He watched her walk to the counter, noting the way other patrons glanced at her scrubs with that particular mixture of respect and discomfort people reserved for medical professionals who dealt with death as a job requirement. When she returned with what looked like the most complicated coffee drink on the menu, she caught him watching. "I know," she said, setting down a cup topped with foam and what appeared to be artistic interpretation of a leaf. "I'm a walking cliché, the overworked nurse who orders the sugar bomb coffee because it's the only joy left in her day. I wasn't, you were thinking it." But she smiled when she said it, and the smile transformed her face from exhausted to something else, something almost beautiful. "It's okay. I'm thinking it too." Logan found himself smiling back, surprised by the ease of it. "For the record, I was actually thinking that I have no idea how to drink something that looks like it should be in an art gallery." "From the top down," Maya advised. "Otherwise, the foam to coffee ratio gets weird." She took a sip, closed her eyes briefly, then looked at him with something approaching alertness. "So, Mrs. Huang said you're good with furniture?" And there it was, the lie they were both supposed to maintain. Logan could push it, could ask why a furniture discussion required this specific cafe, and whether Mrs. Huang had given her the same vague assurances about just business. But something about Maya's exhaustion, the realness of it, made him decide to play along. "I do furniture restoration," he confirmed. "Mostly old pieces people inherit and don't know what to do with. Chairs, tables, dressers. Nothing fancy, but I like the work." "Mrs. Huang showed me a table you refinished for her. The one with the carved legs?" "Yeah, that was a fun project. Oak. Probably 1920s, completely covered in old varnish. Took me 3 weeks to strip it down and another 2 to refinish it properly." Maya leaned forward slightly, and Logan realized she was actually interested. Not politely interested, actually interested. "Do you find it meditative, the repetitive work?" The question caught him off guard. Most people asked about profit margins or how he'd learned the trade or whether he watched those furniture restoration shows on cable. Nobody asked if it was meditative. "Yeah," he admitted, "I do. There's something calming about taking something broken or neglected and making it whole again. You can see the progress. You know exactly what needs to happen next. It's..." He paused, aware he was revealing more than he'd intended. "It's predictable in a way most of life isn't." Maya nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "I understand that. Needing something predictable." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't the awkward silence Logan had been dreading. It was the silence of two people who'd both said something true and were adjusting to the weight of it. "I should probably admit something," Maya said finally, not meeting his eyes. "Mrs. Huang didn't tell me this was about furniture." Logan felt something in his chest loosen slightly. "She told me it was about furniture, moving heavy pieces specifically. She told me you were a widower who needed to remember how to talk to adults who aren't 7 years old or buying your furniture." "I'm not a widower," Logan corrected automatically. Then wished he hadn't because now he'd have to explain. And explaining meant talking about things he'd spent 5 years not talking about. Maya looked up, confusion crossing her face. "I'm sorry. I assumed Mrs. Huang said you lost someone. I thought I did lose someone, but we weren't married. We were engaged, but..." Logan picked up his coffee cup, set it down again. "Car accident 5 years ago this December. She was 8 months pregnant." He'd said those words before, to the police, to the hospital staff, to the grief counselor Rachel had insisted he see, to Zoe when she was old enough to ask why she didn't have a mommy like other kids. But he'd never said them on a first date, if this even qualified as a date, and the rawness of it surprised him. Maya didn't look away, didn't offer the usual platitudes people reflexively deployed when confronted with grief. She just listened, and Logan found himself continuing. "The baby survived. Zoe. She's 7 now, perfect and healthy, and the only reason I got out of bed for about 2 years after it happened. But yeah, Mrs. Huang wasn't wrong. I've gotten very good at talking to 7-year-olds and furniture clients and not much else." "I'm sorry," Maya said, and the way she said it suggested she understood the difference between sympathy and pity. I can't imagine." "What about you?" Logan asked, needing to shift the weight of confession. What did Mrs. Huang tell you that wasn't true? Maya laughed, but it was edged with something dark. Pretty much everything except the part about you being good with furniture. She said you needed help moving pieces for an estate sale, that you'd lost your wife and were downsizing, that you could use some company because grief is hard and neighbors should help neighbors. Subtle, Logan murmured. She's dying, Maya said abruptly, then seemed to catch herself. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have just… What? Maya's hands tightened around her cup. Mrs. Huang. She has stage 4 pancreatic cancer. I'm her hospice nurse. I've been coming to her house 3 times a week for the past 2 months. I thought you knew. The cafe sounds, the espresso machine, the conversations, the acoustic guitar bleeding through speakers, all seemed to recede into white noise. Logan heard his own voice from a distance. No, she said she was fine, just getting older. She didn't want people to worry or pity her. Those were her exact words. Maya's professional mask had slipped back into place, but Logan could see the cost of maintaining it. She probably has a few weeks left, maybe a month if we're lucky. I'm sorry. I assumed you knew. That's why she wanted us to meet. She's been… Maya paused, choosing words carefully. She's been trying to arrange things, make sure people are taken care of. Logan stood up so fast his chair scraped against the floor, drawing looks from nearby tables. His chest felt tight, his breath shallow. Mrs. Huang dying. Mrs. Huang, who'd brought them soup when Zoe had the flu, who taught his daughter to fold origami cranes, who'd quietly left bags of vegetables from her garden on his porch without expecting thanks. Mrs. Huang, who'd apparently seen him drowning and decided her final act would be matchmaking. I need… Logan gestured vaguely toward the door. I'm sorry. This isn't… I need some air. He was outside before Maya could respond, the September afternoon pressing against him with its too bright light and too warm air. His truck was 50 feet away, parked under a maple tree losing its leaves in slow motion. He could get in it, drive away. Pretend this afternoon hadn't happened. Go back to his carefully constructed life where grief was manageable because he'd made it small enough to control. The cafe door opened behind him. Logan? Wait. Maya stood on the sidewalk in her wrinkled scrubs, holding both their coffee cups even though his had been mostly empty. She looked uncertain but determined, like someone who'd learned to push through discomfort because the alternative was worse. I'm sorry, she said again. I shouldn't have told you like that. It's been a long day, and I wasn't thinking, and… Is she in pain? Logan interrupted. Maya's expression softened. No, we're managing it well. She's comfortable, tired but not suffering. Does she know that she set us up? Yes. Maya offered him his coffee cup, which he took reflexively. She asked me about a week ago if I'd be open to meeting someone. Said she knew a good man who'd forgotten how to be anything except a father. That you were drowning in responsibility and safety, and that you needed someone to remind you what living looked like. Logan let out a breath that was almost a laugh. What did you say? I said I'd think about it. And then yesterday, she told me she'd already arranged everything, and if I didn't show up, she'd be very disappointed. Mrs. Huang has a way of making disappointment feel like a mortal sin. Yeah, she does. They stood there on the sidewalk, 2 strangers connected by an elderly woman's manipulation, holding cooling coffee and processing the fact that this absurd afternoon was actually about death and loneliness and the terrifying possibility of connection. For what it's worth, Maya said quietly, I almost didn't come. I was going to text you some excuse about an emergency at work, which wouldn't even have been a lie because there's always an emergency. But then I thought about Mrs. Huang spending her final weeks worrying about other people instead of herself, and I couldn't… She stopped, shook her head. Sorry. You don't need my life story. I kind of do, Logan said, surprising himself. If we're doing this, whatever this is… Maya looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. Do you want to walk? There's a path along the lake. It's quieter than standing on a sidewalk outside a cafe where everyone's probably watching us through the window. Logan glanced back. Sure enough, several patrons were very obviously not looking in their direction while clearly watching them. Yeah, let's walk. The path wound along the lake shore, separated from the water by a low stone wall that looked original to the park's 1930s construction. Ducks congregated near a family throwing bread despite the signs asking people not to feed wildlife. A jogger passed them going the opposite direction, breathing hard but looking peaceful in that way people who exercise regularly seem to achieve. They walked in silence for a few minutes, sipping their respective coffees, adjusting to this new configuration of the afternoon. "I came straight from work," Maya said eventually. "Obviously." She gestured to her scrubs. "I had a patient die this morning, 73-year-old man with congestive heart failure. It was expected, peaceful even, but his wife was there and she kept saying thank you to me over and over, like I'd done something heroic instead of just managing medication and holding her hand while her husband stopped breathing. Logan didn't know what to say to that, so he stayed quiet. I see death every day," Maya continued. "It's literally my job, and most days I can handle it. I can be professional and compassionate and help families through the worst moments of their lives without falling apart. But some days," she paused, watching the ducks fight over breadcrumbs. "Some days, I come home and I can't remember why I chose this career. I can't remember what living people sound like, because all I hear is death rattle and grief. And then I feel guilty for feeling that way because these people trust me with their loved ones' final moments, and I should be honored, and I am honored, but I'm also so fucking tired." The profanity landed with impact, sharp against the gentle afternoon. "Sorry," Maya added. "That was unprofessional." "We're not at work," Logan pointed out, "and you're allowed to be tired." "Are you? Allowed to be tired?" The question struck something deep. Logan stopped walking, staring out at the lake where sunlight turned the water into something that looked like happiness might feel if he could remember what that was. "I don't know," he admitted. "I have Zoe. She needs me to be her dad, not some broken person who can't get past something that happened 5 years ago. So I get up every morning, and I make her breakfast, and I take her to school, and I work on furniture, and I read her stories at night, and I do everything a good father is supposed to do. And that's fine. It's more than fine. It's everything. But I haven't had a conversation with another adult that wasn't about logistics or business or my daughter in so long that I forgot how. My sister keeps trying to set me up on dates, and I keep saying no because what's the point? I already had my person. I was supposed to marry her and raise our daughter together and build a life, and then a drunk driver ran a red light, and now I'm just here, surviving, making furniture and raising a kid, and trying not to think too hard about how the next 40 years are going to look exactly like the last 5. He'd never said that out loud before. Never admitted that survival wasn't the same as living, that he'd made peace with emptiness because it felt safer than hope. Maya was quiet for so long, Logan thought he'd said too much. Then, "Mrs. Huang told me you were teaching your daughter how to survive but not how to live. I didn't understand what she meant until just now." Logan felt something crack in his chest. "She said that?" "Last week. She was having a good day, more alert than usual, and she started talking about you and Zoe. She said you're a wonderful father, that Zoe is lucky to have you, but that you're so afraid of losing anyone else that you've stopped letting anyone in, including yourself. She's dying, and she spent time psychoanalyzing me?" "She's dying, and she's spending time trying to fix the people she's leaving behind," Maya corrected gently. "That's who she is. She does the same thing with her daughter in Seattle, her son in Portland, her grandchildren. She's trying to arrange everyone's happiness because she won't be here to worry about it later." They started walking again, slower now, their steps falling into an unconscious rhythm. "What about you?" Logan asked. "What did she say about you?" Maya smiled, but it was sad around the edges. "That I carry death home with me. That I've forgotten how to leave work at work because my work is about helping people die with dignity, and you can't really compartmentalize dignity. She said I needed to remember what it felt like to be around someone who builds things instead of managing endings. Is that true? Probably. I haven't had a relationship that lasted longer than 3 months in the past 5 years. Most people can't handle dating someone who spends their days with the dying. It's too heavy, too depressing. They want someone who can be happy without effort, and I left that person behind somewhere around year 2 of nursing school." I don't think happiness without effort exists, Logan said. I think that's just people pretending. Maybe, but most people are better at pretending than I am. They'd reached the end of the path, where it curved back toward the parking lot and the cafe beyond it. The sun was lower now, stretching their shadows long across the grass. Logan checked his phone. 4:30. He needed to pick up Zoe from Rachel's by 6, which gave him just over an hour if he left now. He didn't want to leave. The realization was startling in its simplicity. For the first time in 5 years, he was having a conversation that felt real, with a person who understood that survival and living were different things, and he didn't want it to end so he could return to his carefully controlled existence. I should get my daughter, he said reluctantly. She's with my sister, and if I'm late, Rachel will assume this went really well and will want a full report including details I definitely won't want to share. Maya laughed, a real laugh that changed her whole face. Family's complicated. Understatement of the century. Logan paused, then took a chance. Would you want to do this again? Not the setup part, just talking, walking, coffee that costs more than it should. He watched uncertainty flicker across Maya's face, followed by something that looked like hope trying to break through exhaustion. I'm not good at this, she warned, at dating or whatever this is. I work weird hours, and I'm emotionally unavailable on good days. And sometimes I can't talk about my day because patient confidentiality exists, so I'll just seem distant for no reason you can understand. I have a 7-year-old who asks questions like, "What happens to our thoughts when we die?" at breakfast, Logan countered. And I spend most of my time alone in a workshop sanding wood. I'm not exactly a prize either. We're a mess. Completely. Maya pulled out her phone. Give me your number. I'll text you when I have a free evening. It might not be for a week or two, depending on how my patients are doing, but that's fine. I'm not going anywhere. They exchanged numbers with the awkwardness of people who'd forgotten how this worked, then stood in the parking lot near Logan's truck, neither quite ready to leave. Can I ask you something? Maya said finally. And you can tell me if it's too personal. Go ahead. Do you still love her, the woman you lost? Logan considered the question, appreciating that Maya had asked it directly instead of dancing around it. I don't know. I loved who we were together. I loved that she gave me Zoe. But honestly, it's been so long and I was so different then that sometimes I can't remember what that love felt like. It's like trying to remember a dream. You know it happened, but the details don't quite add up anymore. Maya nodded. My mom died when I was in college. Car accident, actually. Drunk driver, like your fiancé, and people always expected me to carry this torch of grief forever. But the truth is, grief changes. It doesn't disappear, but it stops being the main thing. It becomes context instead of content. Context instead of content, Logan repeated. I like that. Yeah, well, I read a lot of grief literature for work. Occasionally something sticks. They said goodbye with the promise of a future text, a maybe date, a continuation of something that had started as manipulation but felt like it might become real. Logan drove to Rachel's house in a daze, only half listening to Zoe's detailed recap of her afternoon making cookies with her aunt, while his mind replayed the conversation by the lake. That night, after Zoe was asleep and the house had settled into its familiar nighttime quiet, Logan sat in his workshop and thought about Mrs. Huang dying 3 houses down, about Maya carrying death home with her every night, about survival versus living. He picked up a piece of sandpaper and ran it across an old chair he'd been restoring, feeling the wood grain catch and smooth under his hands. Predictable, controllable, safe. His phone buzzed. Maya, thank you for today. I know it wasn't what either of us expected, but I'm glad we didn't run away screaming. Logan smiled, then typed back, same. Although there's still time for the screaming part. Maya, don't tempt me. I have excellent lung capacity. Maya, I'm going to see Mrs. Huang tomorrow. Do you want me to tell her the setup worked, or should we make her sweat? Logan thought about it, imagining Mrs. Huang's satisfaction at her successful matchmaking despite being in the final weeks of her life. Logan, tell her it worked. She's earned that. Maya, she really has. Maya, good night, Logan. Thanks for not being a serial killer or a cryptocurrency bro. Logan, the bar for modern dating is truly inspirational. Maya, you have no idea. Logan set down his phone and returned to his sanding, but something had shifted. The workshop felt less like a hiding place and more like just a workshop. The quiet felt less like isolation and more like peace. And for the first time in 5 years, when he thought about the future, it didn't look exactly like the past on repeat. He wasn't sure if this thing with Maya would become anything. Wasn't sure if he was capable of becoming the kind of person who could sustain a relationship when he'd spent half a decade building walls. But Mrs. Huang had seen something in both of them, two people who'd forgotten how to live, and had decided her final gift would be introduction. That had to mean something. In the morning, Logan would check on Mrs. Huang. Would thank her and probably cry and tell her she was meddling and wonderful. He'd explain to Zoe that their neighbor was sicker than they'd realized, would prepare his daughter for the grief that was coming while trying to model that grief didn't mean shutting down. But tonight, he sanded an old chair and thought about a woman in scrubs who understood that some days survival was the victory, and who hadn't run away when he'd admitted he'd stopped living years ago. It wasn't much, but it was more than he'd had yesterday. And maybe that was how healing worked. Not in grand gestures or sudden revelations, but in small moments of honesty with a stranger who might become something more, in texts sent after bedtime, in the decision to show up instead of hiding, in the terrifying acknowledgement that the walls he'd built to keep pain out were also keeping everything else out too. Logan finished smoothing the chair's leg, ran his hand across the wood to check for rough spots, and found none. Perfect, predictable, fixed. He wondered what it would feel like to apply that same patience to himself. His phone buzzed again. Maya, still awake? Logan. Unfortunately, you? Maya. Just got home from a late call, patient having a crisis. Everything's stable now, but I'm too wired to sleep. Logan. Want to talk about it? Maya. Can't, privacy rules, but I could use a distraction. Tell me about the furniture you're working on. So Logan did. He described the chair, its probable age, the way the wood grain suggested it had been made from a single tree, the careful joinery that indicated a craftsman who'd cared about quality. He explained the process of restoration, the satisfaction of revealing beauty that had been buried under decades of neglect. And Maya asked questions, real questions that showed she was listening, that she cared about the answers, that she understood the metaphor without him having to say it out loud. They texted until almost midnight, two people who should have been sleeping but couldn't quite let go of the connection, fragile as it was. When they finally said goodnight, Logan lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, feeling something he hadn't felt in years. Anticipation. Not dread, not the weight of tomorrow's responsibilities, but actual curiosity about what came next. It scared him. It also felt like the beginning of something that might, if he was brave enough to let it, look like living instead of just surviving. Outside his window, 3 houses down, Mrs. Huang's lights were still on. Logan imagined her sitting in her living room, satisfied with her matchmaking, preparing for death the same way she'd lived, by taking care of everyone else first. He made a mental note to visit her in the morning, to say thank you, to tell her he was trying, even though trying was terrifying, even though he had no idea if he still knew how. That's all any of them could do, he supposed. Try, show up. Risk the possibility that opening yourself up to life also meant opening yourself up to loss, and choose connection anyway. Logan closed his eyes, and for the first time in years, fell asleep thinking about the future instead of the past. The morning came too quickly, sunlight filtering through Logan's bedroom curtains with the persistence of responsibility. He'd managed maybe 4 hours of sleep, his mind cycling through the previous day's revelations until exhaustion finally claimed him somewhere around 2 in the morning. Now, at 6:30, Zoe was already awake and singing something from a cartoon he'd never actually watched, her voice carrying down the hallway with the unbridled enthusiasm only children possessed before coffee became necessary. Logan pulled himself out of bed, his body protesting in the way it did lately, small aches that reminded him he was closer to 40 than 30, that restoration work was hard on the knees and back, that grief aged you in ways that had nothing to do with calendars. In the kitchen, Zoe had already gotten herself a bowl and was contemplating the cereal options with the seriousness of a judge deliberating a life sentence. The granola or the chocolate ones? She asked without looking up. What does your gut tell you? My gut says chocolate, but my brain says you'll make me eat fruit if I choose chocolate. Your brain is wise beyond its years. Zoe sighed dramatically and reached for the granola. Can we visit Mrs. Huang today? I want to show her the origami frog I made at Aunt Rachel's. It actually jumps when you press it. Logan's hand froze halfway to the coffee maker. He'd been planning to visit Mrs. Huang alone, to have the adult conversation about dying and matchmaking without Zoe present. But his daughter's innocent question reminded him that Mrs. Huang wasn't just his neighbor. She was Zoe's friend too, her origami teacher, the kind grandmother figure who'd filled a gap neither of them talked about. Yeah, he said quietly, we can visit her today. But Zoe, I need to tell you something first. Zoe looked up from her cereal, her dark eyes, Natalie's eyes. Logan still couldn't look at them without seeing the woman he'd lost, widening with concern. Is Mrs. Huang okay? Logan sat down across from her, choosing his words carefully. He'd learned in 5 years of single parenting that children could handle honesty better than adults expected, but delivery mattered. Mrs. Huang is very sick, sweetheart. Sicker than we knew. She has something called cancer, and the doctors can't fix it. She's going to die soon. He watched his daughter process this information, her small face cycling through confusion, denial, and finally a kind of ancient sadness that no 7-year-old should have to carry. But Zoe had already lost a mother she'd never known. Death wasn't abstract to her the way it was to other kids her age. How soon? Zoe asked. Maybe a few weeks. Maybe a little longer, I don't know exactly. Is she in pain? No, she has a nurse who makes sure she's comfortable. Zoe pushed her cereal around with her spoon, thinking, is that the lady you met yesterday, the nurse? Logan shouldn't have been surprised that Zoe had connected those dots. Yeah, her name is Maya. She takes care of Mrs. Huang. Did Mrs. Huang make you go on a date with her nurse so she could spy on you through her nurse? Despite everything, Logan laughed. I don't think it was quite that calculated, but yes, Mrs. Huang definitely set us up. Do you like her, Maya? The question was casual, but Logan knew his daughter well enough to hear the real question underneath. Are you going to leave me for someone else? Am I going to lose you too? I don't know her well enough yet to know if I like her, Logan said honestly. But she seems kind, and she understands that sometimes life is hard and sad, and we just have to keep going anyway. I think we might become friends. Just friends? Maybe more than friends eventually. But there's no rush, and nothing is going to change with you and me. You're my priority, always. Zoe nodded, seemingly satisfied, and returned to her cereal. But Logan caught the slight relaxation in her shoulders, the way she'd been holding tension she was too young to name. They finished breakfast in comfortable silence. Then Logan checked his phone while Zoe got dressed. A text from Maya, sent at 5:45 in the morning. Maya, heading to Mrs. Huang's at 8. She asked if you'd come by today. Specifically asked. I think she knows we talked. Logan, planning to bring Zoe around 9. Is that okay? Maya, perfect. She'll love that. Fair warning, though. She's going to be insufferably smug about the setup working. Logan, I'm prepared for maximum smugness. Maya, no you're not. Nobody is. At 9 o'clock exactly, Logan and Zoe walked across the lawn to Mrs. Huang's yellow house, Zoe clutching her origami frog like a talisman. The wind chimes on the porch sang in the September breeze, and Logan noticed what he'd been too distracted to see before. The garden had been tended recently, weeds pulled, flowers deadheaded. Maya's work, probably. Small acts of care for a dying woman who'd spent her life caring for others. Maya answered the door in jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair down instead of pulled back, and Logan was struck again by how different she looked outside the hospital scrubs. More approachable, more human, more like someone he might actually get to know instead of the exhausted stranger from yesterday. Hi, she said, smiling at Zoe. You must be Zoe. Your dad told me about you. Zoe studied Maya with the frank assessment children specialized in. He said you're nice, and that you help people who are dying. Zoe, Logan started, mortified, but Maya laughed. He's right on both counts. I try to be nice, and yes, I help people at the end of their lives. It's a hard job, but someone needs to do it. My mom died, Zoe announced, but I didn't know her because I was still inside her when the car crashed. Dad says she would have loved me. Maya's expression softened, and Logan saw genuine compassion there, not the practiced sympathy medical professionals learned. I'm sure she would have. And I'm sorry you didn't get to know her. It's okay. I have Dad. Zoe held up her frog. Can I show this to Mrs. Huang? She's in the living room. She's been excited to see you all morning. They followed Maya through the house, and Logan noticed the changes, the hospital bed set up in the corner, the oxygen tank on standby, the medications organized on the side table with military precision. Evidence of dying, carefully managed to preserve dignity. Mrs. Huang sat in her armchair by the window, wrapped in a colorful quilt that looked handmade. She'd lost weight, her frame more fragile than Logan remembered, but her eyes were bright and alert, and when she saw them, her face lit up with undisguised delight. Logan! And my sweet Zoe! Come here, come here! Zoe ran over carefully, mindful of the fragility, and held out her frog. Look, it jumps! Aunt Rachel helped me with the hard part, but I did most of it myself. Mrs. Huang examined the frog with the seriousness it deserved. Beautiful work, much better than your first attempts. You're becoming a true origami artist. While Zoe demonstrated the frog's jumping ability, Logan met Mrs. Huang's eyes over his daughter's head. The old woman's expression shifted from delight to something more knowing, more satisfied. So, she said, you met my friend Maya. I did. Nice try with the furniture story. I have no idea what you mean. Maya needed help with furniture. You're good with furniture. It was perfectly logical. You told her I was a widower who needed to remember how to talk to adults. Mrs. Huang waved a dismissive hand. Details. The important thing is you didn't run away. I almost did. But you didn't, and you're texting her. Maya told me. She's terrible at hiding things from me. I'm sitting right here, Maya called from the kitchen, where she'd gone to make tea. Then stop eavesdropping, Mrs. Huang called back, grinning. She turned to Logan, her expression sobering. I'm dying, Logan. You know this now. Maya told me. I wish you'd told me yourself. Would you have handled it well? Or would you have started treating me like I was already gone? Logan opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. She was right. He would have pulled away, armored himself against another loss, started grieving before death had even arrived. I'm sorry, Mrs. Huang continued, softer now, for lying, for manipulating, for using my death as leverage to arrange your life. But I've watched you for 5 years, Logan. Watched you build a good life for your daughter while forgetting to build one for yourself. And I know what that does to a person. I know what it does to a child to grow up with a parent who's chosen survival over living. I'm doing my best. I know you are. And your best is wonderful. Zoe is happy and loved and safe. But she's also learning that love means loss, and the only way to avoid loss is to avoid connection. Is that what you want to teach her? The words hit like a physical blow. Logan looked at Zoe, who was now trying to teach Mrs. Huang a new fold, her small hands patient and careful. Was that what he was teaching her? That walls were safer than windows. That predictability mattered more than possibility. I don't know how to do anything else, he admitted. Then learn. That's what Maya is doing. Learning how to leave death at work instead of carrying it home. Learning that she deserves happiness, even though her job is about endings. You two are good for each other, I think. Both of you too scared to live. Both of you needing someone who understands why. Maya returned with tea, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Zoe's school, Mrs. Huang's favorite television shows, the neighborhood gossip she'd miss when she was gone. But Logan couldn't shake the weight of what she'd said, the uncomfortable accuracy of it. They stayed for an hour before Zoe started getting restless, and Logan promised they'd visit again soon. At the door, Mrs. Huang caught his hand. Thank you, she said quietly, for trying. That's all I ask. Just try. I will. Outside, while Zoe ran ahead to chase a squirrel, Maya walked with Logan to the property line. She's getting weaker, Maya said. Yesterday, she was more alert than she's been in weeks, probably running on adrenaline from playing matchmaker. Today's more typical. She sleeps a lot. Confusion comes and goes. We're probably looking at 2 weeks, maybe 3. And she spent her energy on setting us up. She spent her energy on the people she loves. That's what she does. Maya paused. My schedule is chaos for the next few days. I have 2 other patients declining rapidly, and I need to be available. But maybe this weekend, if you're free, we could actually go on a real date. Not an ambush setup, just dinner or something. Logan wanted to say yes immediately, but caution was a hard habit to break. I'd need to find a babysitter. My sister usually helps, but bring Zoe, Maya interrupted. If you're comfortable with that, I'd like to meet her properly. Not as Mrs. Huang's nurse, just as me. The offer surprised him. Most women he'd met, admittedly not many in the past 5 years, had seen Zoe as a complication to navigate, not someone to include. You sure? She's 7. She has opinions about everything and will absolutely interrogate you. I work with dying people for a living, Logan. I can handle a curious 7-year-old. Maya smiled. Besides, she's part of your life. I should know her if I'm going to know you. Okay, Logan heard himself say. Saturday? There's a place by the river that's kid-friendly. Good pizza, outdoor seating. Perfect. I'll text you. They stood in the morning sun, 2 people trying to figure out how to do something neither of them remembered how to do, and Logan felt that same anticipation from the night before. Scary, exhilarating, real. The next few days passed in the strange rhythm that had become Logan's normal. Work in his shop, time with Zoe, the constant low-level anxiety that he was failing at everything even when evidence suggested otherwise. But now there was something else too, a thread of possibility running through the routine. He and Maya texted sporadically. Her schedule was as chaotic as she'd warned, messages arriving at odd hours when she had 5 minutes between patients. But the conversations had depth to them, neither of them interested in the superficial dance of early dating. Maya. Patient just told me she's not afraid of dying, she's afraid of being forgotten. I promised her daughter would remember. How do you promise something like that? Logan. You can't, but you can believe it anyway. Memory is how we fight death. Maya. That's surprisingly philosophical for midnight. Logan. I'm refinishing a cabinet. Wood philosophy is the best philosophy. Maya. Is that a thing? Logan. It is now. Wednesday evening, Logan got a call from Maya's number at 11:30. He answered, worried it was an emergency. Hey, is everything... I need to tell you something, and I need you to not make a big deal about it. Maya's voice was tight, controlled in the way people sounded when they were barely holding together. Okay. I lost a patient tonight. Not one of mine, but I was covering for another nurse, and she was young, 43, and it was sudden, faster than we expected, and her kids were there, and they were so young, younger than Zoe, and I can't... Her breath hitched. I can't stop seeing their faces. Logan sat down on his workshop stool, phone pressed to his ear. Do you want me to come over, or do you need to be alone? I don't know. Both. Neither. I'm not good at this, Logan, at asking for help or admitting when things are too hard. I usually just push through until I can't feel anything anymore. Where are you? Home. I just got here. I'm sitting in my car in my driveway because I can't make myself go inside to the empty apartment where I'll just replay everything that happened. Stay on the phone with me, Logan said. You don't have to talk. Just stay on the line. He heard her breath, ragged and slow, gradually evening out. Minutes passed. Logan didn't fill the silence with platitudes or advice. He just existed on the other end of the line, present without pressure. I chose this career, Maya said finally. I knew what it would be, but some nights I can't remember why I thought I was strong enough. Maybe strength isn't about not breaking. Maybe it's about breaking and showing up anyway. That's exhausting. Yeah, it really is. More silence, but it felt different now, shared instead of isolated. Thank you, Maya whispered, for not telling me it'll be okay or that I should focus on the patients I saved, for just being here. I'm not going anywhere. Saturday still good? For dinner? Saturday's perfect, but Maya, if you need to cancel, if you need space or time, or... I need normal, she interrupted. I need to remember what it feels like to be around someone who builds things instead of watching things end. So yeah, Saturday. Pizza with you and your terrifyingly perceptive daughter. She is terrifying. Good, I like a challenge. They talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important. Favorite movies, worst jobs they'd ever had, whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Normal conversation, the kind that reminded them both that life existed outside of grief and death and loss. When they finally hung up, Logan sat in his workshop and thought about Maya sitting in her car, too overwhelmed to go inside. About the strength it took to ask for help. About the courage required to keep choosing a career that broke your heart regularly. He texted her before bed. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone." Her response came 5 minutes later. "Neither are you." Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that made people forget winter was coming. Clear skies, warm sun, leaves just starting their transformation from green to gold. Logan spent the morning anxious and distracted, changing shirts 3 times before Zoe told him he looked fine and to please stop being weird. "I'm not being weird." "You've checked your hair in the mirror 4 times. That's weird." "I'm just making sure I look presentable." Zoe rolled her eyes with the exasperation of someone much older. "Maya already likes you. Mrs. Huang said so. She told me when we visited." "Mrs. Huang is meddling from her deathbed." "Mrs. Huang is smart. You should listen to her." Logan couldn't argue with that logic. They met Maya at the restaurant at 6, a casual place called River's Edge that had been around since the 70s and looked it. Wood paneling, checkered tablecloths, the kind of worn-in comfort that made families return for generations. Maya was already there, sitting at an outdoor table near the river, and when she saw them, her whole face changed, anxiety smoothing into genuine warmth. She dressed carefully, jeans and a green sweater that brought out the color of her eyes, her hair loose around her shoulders. Not trying too hard, but trying. Logan appreciated the effort because it mirrored his own. "Hi," she said, standing. "Zoe, it's good to see you again." Zoe studied Maya with the frank assessment she'd employed at Mrs. Huang's house. "Dad's been nervous all day. He changed his shirt 3 times. Zoe, "It's okay," Maya said, laughing. "I changed my outfit twice and redid my makeup. We're all nervous. It's allowed." Zoe seemed satisfied by this honesty and climbed into her chair. "Can we order the pizza with extra cheese?" "You can order whatever you want," Logan said, then looked at Maya. "Within reason." They ordered a large pizza with extra cheese for Zoe, a second with vegetables that made Zoe wrinkle her nose in disgust, waters all around. The conversation started awkward, all 3 of them trying too hard, but gradually found its rhythm. Maya asked Zoe about school, and Zoe launched into a detailed explanation of her current science project about plant growth that involved far more technical language than Logan had realized his 7-year-old knew. "We're testing whether plants grow better with different types of music," Zoe explained seriously. "My hypothesis is that classical music will work best because it's more organized, but my friend Emma thinks rock music will win because it has more energy." "What do you think so far?" Maya asked, genuinely interested. "The classical music plant is taller, but the rock music plant has more leaves, so we're both kind of right." "That's good science. Multiple variables, nuanced results." Zoe beamed, and Logan felt something in his chest ease. This was going well. Better than well. The pizza arrived, and conversation flowed more naturally. Zoe asked Maya about her job in the careful way kids asked about things they knew were serious. "Do people cry a lot when they're dying?" Maya didn't flinch from the question. "Some do, some don't. Everyone handles it differently. Some people are scared, some are peaceful, some are angry. There's no right way to die, just like there's no right way to live." "Are you sad when they die, even though it's your job?" "Yeah, I am, every time. But I'm also honored that I got to help them. Death is hard, but it's also natural. It's part of life. My job is to make sure people aren't in pain and that they're surrounded by love when it happens." Zoe considered this, chewing her pizza thoughtfully. "Mrs. Huang is going to die soon." "She is. Are you sad about that?" "Very sad. Mrs. Huang is special, but I'm also grateful I got to know her and help her." "Me too," Zoe said quietly. Logan watched his daughter process mortality with the help of a woman he'd known less than a week, and he felt grateful in a way that hurt. The kind of gratitude that comes from realizing you can't do everything alone, that accepting help isn't weakness. After dinner, they walked along the river path, Zoe running ahead to examine interesting rocks and report back on their qualities. Logan and Maya followed at a slower pace, close enough that their arms occasionally brushed. "She's wonderful," Maya said. "Scary smart and surprisingly emotionally intelligent." "She's had to be. Growing up without a mother, dealing with my grief even when I tried to hide it, she learned to read emotions early." "You're a good dad, Logan." "I'm trying. Most days I feel like I'm failing." "That's how you know you're doing it right. The ones who think they're perfect are the ones screwing up." They reached a bench overlooking the water and sat while Zoe investigated the shoreline under strict instructions not to get wet. "Can I ask you something?" Maya said. "And you can tell me if it's too much, too fast." "Go ahead." "What do you want? From this? From us? From whatever we're doing?" Logan watched the sunset paint the river in shades of orange and pink, choosing his words carefully. "Honestly, I don't know. I haven't wanted anything except stability for 5 years. Haven't let myself want anything because wanting felt dangerous. But being around you, I want to try. Want to see if I can remember how to be someone other than just Zoe's dad. And if it's hard, if I have bad days where I can't be emotionally available, if my job gets in the way, then we figure it out. I'm not expecting perfect, Maya. I'm just expecting honest." She leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture that felt both casual and significant. "I can do honest. Honest is all I have left most days." They sat in comfortable silence, watching Zoe collect rocks, and Logan realized this was what living felt like. Not the absence of fear, but the choice to move forward despite it. Not the guarantee of happiness, but the willingness to risk unhappiness for something real. His phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "How's the date going? Do I need to prepare for wedding planning or damage control?" Logan showed Maya the message, and she laughed. "Your sister sounds intense. You have no idea. She's been trying to set me up for 3 years. This is probably the best day of her life. Tell her it's going well, but maybe don't mention the wedding planning. I feel like we should have at least 5 dates before discussing marriage." So practical. "I'm a delight." Logan texted Rachel back. "Going well. Stop being creepy." Rachel. "Never. Is she nice? Does Zoe like her? Are you smiling like an actual human person?" Logan. "Yes to all. Now leave me alone." Rachel. "So proud of you." He pocketed his phone and found Maya watching him with amusement. "Overbearing family is part of the package, I'm afraid." "I have no family except a father I haven't spoken to in 10 years. I'll take overbearing over absence any day." The comment was casual, but Logan heard the weight behind it. "Do you want to talk about it?" "Not tonight. Tonight is going too well to ruin it with daddy issues." She stood, brushing off her jeans. "We should probably head back before Zoe decides to test whether rocks float better than pizza." They collected Zoe, who had amassed a collection of 17 rocks she deemed essential, and walked back to the parking lot. At Maya's car, there was the awkward moment of deciding how to say goodbye. Too soon for kissing, too late for handshakes. Maya solved it by hugging him, quick but genuine, then kneeling down to Zoe's level. "Thanks for sharing your dad tonight. I had fun." "You can share him again," Zoe announced. "He's less grumpy when you're around." "I'm not grumpy." "Dad, you're definitely grumpy." "It's okay. Adults are allowed to be grumpy." Maya laughed, stood, and met Logan's eyes. "Text me when you get home?" "Yeah, drive safe." He watched her drive away, then turned to find Zoe studying him with that too-knowing expression. "What?" "You like her. Is that okay with you?" Zoe thought about it seriously. "Yeah, she's nice, and she doesn't talk to me like I'm stupid. Also, she knows about rocks." High praise. "The highest," Zoe confirmed. That night, after Zoe was asleep, Logan and Maya texted for 2 hours. The conversation ranging from serious to silly, revealing small pieces of themselves in the way people did when testing whether vulnerability would be met with care or judgment. Maya. "Zoe asked me if I was going to be her new mom." Logan. "What? When?" Maya. "When you went to the bathroom, she was very direct about it." Logan. "I'm so sorry." I'll talk to her about appropriate questions. Maya, don't. I appreciated the honesty. I told her I was your friend right now, and if we became more than friends, we'd all figure it out together. She seemed satisfied. Logan, you're good with her. Maya, she's easy to be good with. She's got your honesty and probably her mom's intelligence. Lucky combination. Logan, thank you for tonight, for including her, for being patient with my mess of a life. Maya, your mess fits with my mess. That's what Mrs. Huang saw, I think. Two people with compatible damage. Logan, that's either really healthy or really concerning. Maya, probably both. Sunday morning, Logan woke to his phone ringing at 6:30. Maya's name on the screen, and his stomach dropped. Hello? It's Mrs. Huang. Maya's voice was thick with exhaustion and grief. She declined rapidly overnight. I'm here now. She's asking for you and Zoe. If you want to say goodbye, it should be soon. Logan's chest tightened. How soon? Hours, maybe. I'm sorry, Logan. I know this is sudden. We'll be there in 20 minutes. He woke Zoe gently, explained that Mrs. Huang was dying and wanted to see them. Zoe cried quietly while getting dressed, and Logan let her, knowing that suppressing grief only made it worse. They walked to Mrs. Huang's house in the early morning light, the world still quiet except for birds and the distant sound of traffic. Maya met them at the door, still in yesterday's clothes, clearly having been there all night. She looked exhausted and sad, and so damn strong it made Logan's heart ache. She's lucid right now, Maya said quietly, but fading in and out. Don't be alarmed if she doesn't always make sense. Mrs. Huang lay in the hospital bed, diminished but alert, and when she saw them, she smiled. My favorite people, she whispered. Zoe climbed carefully onto the bed, mindful of the tubes and wires, and took Mrs. Huang's hand. I brought you something. She pulled from her pocket one of the rocks from last night, a smooth gray stone with a white stripe through the middle. It's for luck, Zoe explained. Maya says there's no right way to die, but I think you should have luck anyway. Mrs. Huang's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, sweetheart. I'll keep it with me. Logan stood at the bedside, throat tight, watching a woman who'd been part of his life for years prepare to leave it. I'm glad you came, Mrs. Huang said to him. Both of you. And I'm glad you're trying, Logan, with Maya, with yourself. That's all I wanted. For you to try. I am, I promise. Good. She looked at Maya, who stood in the doorway trying to give them privacy while staying close enough to help. And you, stop carrying the world on your shoulders. Let someone else help. I'm trying too, Maya said, her voice breaking slightly. I know, you're both so stubborn. Mrs. Huang closed her eyes, tired from the effort of speaking. Take care of each other. That's all. Just take care of each other. They stayed for an hour, Zoe eventually falling asleep curled against Logan's side while Mrs. Huang drifted in and out of consciousness. Maya monitored vitals, adjusted medications, provided care with a gentleness that made Logan understand why she'd chosen this impossible career. When Mrs. Huang's breathing became more labored, Maya quietly suggested Logan take Zoe home. Some moments were too private, too final for a child to witness. Logan carried his sleeping daughter home, tucked her into bed, then stood in his kitchen staring at nothing, waiting for the call he knew was coming. It came at 2 p.m. Maya's voice steady but broken. She's gone. Peaceful. Surrounded by her family on the phone and me holding her hand. She waited until after you and Zoe left. I think she didn't want you to see it. Are you okay? No, but I will be. A pause. Can I come over when I'm done here? I don't want to be alone. Yes, please. Maya arrived at 7 that evening, exhausted and wrung out, and Logan opened the door to find her barely holding together. She walked into his arms without a word, and they stood in his doorway while she cried for the woman who'd spent her final weeks trying to fix the living. Later, after the tears had subsided and Zoe had woken up long enough to hug Maya and tell her she was sorry about Mrs. Huang, they sat on Logan's back porch watching the sun set over the lake. She left me a letter, Maya said quietly. She wrote letters for everyone, her kids, her grandchildren, me. Mine said I deserve to be happy even though my job is about death. That I should stop punishing myself for surviving when my patients don't. That sounds like her. She left you one too, and Zoe. I'll bring them tomorrow. They sat in silence, two people brought together by a dying woman's last wish, grieving and grateful and terrified of what came next. I meant what I said yesterday, Logan said finally, about trying, about us. Maya took his hand, lacing their fingers together. Me too. It's scary as hell, but I'm in if you are. I'm in. And sitting there in the fading light, mourning a neighbor who'd seen what they couldn't see in themselves, Logan felt something shift. Not happiness. It was too soon, too raw for that. But possibility. The fragile, terrifying possibility that love might be worth the risk after all. That survival wasn't the same as living, and maybe, just maybe, they could learn the difference together. Mrs. Huang's funeral was held on a Thursday afternoon, the kind of gray October day that felt designed for grief. The church was packed with neighbors, former colleagues, distant relatives who'd flown in from Taiwan and Seattle and Portland, all gathering to mourn a woman who'd spent 78 years making everyone else's life a little easier. Logan sat with Zoe in the third row, Maya beside him in a black dress that made her look even more exhausted than usual, her hand resting lightly on his knee. An anchor, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this. The service was beautiful in the way funerals always tried to be, full of stories about Mrs. Huang's kindness and her legendary dumplings and the way she'd organized the neighborhood like a benevolent general. Her daughter Sarah spoke about a mother who'd immigrated to America with nothing but determination and had built a life through sheer force of will and love. Her grandchildren read poems. A longtime friend sang a hymn in Mandarin that made half the congregation cry, even if they didn't understand the words. But it was the letter, Mrs. Huang's letter to the congregation, read by the pastor in her absence, that broke Logan completely. To my dear friends and neighbors, the pastor read, his voice steady despite the emotion in the room. If you're hearing this, then I've moved on to whatever comes next. I hope it's peaceful. I hope there's good tea. But more than that, I hope you'll remember that life is short and precious and meant to be lived fully, not carefully. I spent too many years being careful, working hard, keeping my head down, making sure everyone else was okay before I considered my own happiness. Don't make my mistakes. Love boldly. Forgive quickly. Take risks on people and possibilities. And for heaven's sake, stop waiting for the perfect moment to start living. The perfect moment is always now. Zoe was crying quietly, and Logan pulled her closer, his own vision blurred. Beside him, Maya's hand tightened on his knee, and he covered it with his own, both of them holding on to each other like survivors of a shipwreck. After the service, they gathered at Mrs. Huang's house. Sarah had opened it for a reception, and the place was filled with the same warmth it had always contained, even in her absence. People shared stories and ate the dumplings Sarah had made from her mother's recipe, and pretended that death was just another transition instead of an ending. Sarah found Logan in the kitchen, where he'd retreated to escape the crowd's emotional intensity. She really liked you, Sarah said, her eyes red but dry. She'd cried herself out earlier. And Zoe. She talked about you both constantly in those final weeks, how you were good people who just needed permission to be happy again. Logan swallowed hard. She was meddling until the end. That was her love language. Sarah smiled. She left you something, both of you, letters and something else. She handed him 2 envelopes, one addressed to Logan in Mrs. Huang's careful handwriting, one to Zoe, and a small wooden box. She wanted you to have this after the funeral, said you'd know what to do with it. Logan opened the box carefully. Inside was a set of woodworking tools, old but beautifully maintained, the kind of quality craftsmanship you couldn't find anymore. Chisels, a small hand plane, carving knives, and beneath them a note in Mrs. Huang's handwriting. For building instead of hiding. For creating instead of surviving. Use them well. His throat closed completely. These had been her husband's tools. David Huang, who died 15 years ago, had been a carpenter before retirement. Mrs. Huang had kept them like relics, and now she was giving them to Logan, trusting him with something precious. Thank you, he managed to tell Sarah. I don't know what to say. She knew you'd appreciate them. She said you understood the value of making things whole again. Sarah touched his arm gently. Take care of yourself, Logan. And take care of Maya. Mom was convinced you two were perfect for each other, and she was rarely wrong about people. After the reception, Logan drove Maya home to her apartment, a small one-bedroom in a complex near the hospital, the kind of place that functioned as somewhere to sleep between shifts rather than an actual home. She'd been quiet since the funeral, processing in the way people did when grief was both professional and personal. "Do you want to come up?" she asked as he pulled into the parking lot. "I have wine and frozen pizza, and absolutely no emotional bandwidth for pretending I'm okay. Yeah, let me text Rachel to keep Zoe for a few more hours." Her apartment was exactly what Logan expected, clean but sparse, like someone who spent so little time there they hadn't bothered making it personal. A couch, a television, bookshelves filled with medical texts and grief literature. The kitchen looked barely used. The only real decoration was a wall of photographs, Maya with friends, Maya in nursing school, one older photo of a woman who must have been her mother. "I know it's depressing," Maya said, following his gaze. "I keep meaning to make it more homey, but then I work a 70-hour week and can barely remember to buy groceries." "It's not depressing. It's practical." "That's a kind way of saying depressing." Logan smiled despite everything. "Okay, it's a little depressing, but fixable. Are you offering your furniture restoration services?" "I'm offering to help you make this place feel like somewhere you actually want to be instead of somewhere you just sleep." Maya looked at him for a long moment, something shifting in her expression. "You know what's terrifying about you, Logan Reed?" "What?" "You make me want things I convinced myself I didn't need. Like a home instead of just an apartment. Like someone who notices when I'm falling apart. Like a future that doesn't revolve entirely around work and death." She said it matter-of-factly, but Logan heard the vulnerability underneath. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms, and she melted against him with a sigh that sounded like relief. "I'm terrified too," he admitted into her hair. "I haven't wanted anything except safety for 5 years. Haven't let myself imagine a future that looked different than the present. But being with you, it makes me remember what hope feels like. And hope is absolutely terrifying." They stood like that for a long time, two people holding each other up until Maya pulled back and wiped her eyes. "Okay, enough emotions for one day. Let's eat terrible pizza and read Mrs. Huang's letters and cry some more because apparently that's what we're doing now." The pizza was indeed terrible, freezer burned and vaguely cardboard flavored, but they ate it anyway, sitting on her couch with their feet tangled together, putting off the letters because opening them meant facing whatever final wisdom Mrs. Huang had left them. Finally, Maya picked up her envelope. "Together?" "Together." They opened the letters simultaneously, and Logan had to read his twice because the first time the words blurred together. "Dear Logan," it began, "if you're reading this, then I've gone on to whatever comes next, and you're probably feeling guilty about something. That's just who you are. So let me save you the trouble. There's nothing to feel guilty about. You've been a wonderful neighbor and friend, and you've raised Zoe with more love and patience than most people manage with 2 parents. But you've also been hiding, and we both know it. Hiding behind responsibility, behind safety, behind the excuse that Zoe needs stability. And she does need stability. But she also needs to see her father live, not just survive. She needs to learn that love is worth the risk, that opening yourself to joy also means opening yourself to loss. And that's okay because the alternative is a half-life. I've watched you for 5 years, and I've seen you choose the half-life over and over. So I'm asking you, begging you really, to choose differently. Maya is special. Damaged like you're damaged, scared like you're scared, but good and kind and worth the risk. Don't let fear win. Don't teach Zoe that walls are safer than windows. Build something beautiful with the time you have left. That's all any of us can do. With love and entirely too much meddling, Mrs. Huang." Logan looked up to find Maya crying silently, her own letter clutched in her hands. "What did yours say?" he asked gently. Maya wiped her eyes and read aloud, her voice shaking. "Dear Maya, you've been carrying death for so long you've forgotten what life weighs. I see it in you every time you visit, the exhaustion, the isolation, the belief that you don't deserve happiness because you witness so much sadness. But here's what you need to understand. Helping people die with dignity is sacred work, but it doesn't mean you have to die along with them. You're allowed to go home and be happy. You're allowed to love someone. You're allowed to build a life that includes joy alongside the grief. Logan is a good man, broken but healing, scared but trying. He builds things, Maya. He takes what's damaged and makes it whole again. Let him do that for you. Better yet, do it together. You both deserve a love that isn't careful or cautious, but full and messy and real. Stop punishing yourself for surviving. Start living. Your loving and insufferably interfering friend, Mrs. Huang. They sat in silence, absorbing the weight of a dead woman's final advice, and Logan felt something crack open in his chest, not breaking, but expanding. Mrs. Huang had seen through all their defenses, had understood exactly what they needed to hear, and had spent her dying weeks making sure they heard it. She was right, Maya whispered, about all of it. I do carry death home. I have been punishing myself, and I'm so tired of being alone. Me too, Logan admitted. I've been so focused on keeping Zoe safe that I forgot I'm allowed to want things too, allowed to take risks, and I want this, Maya. Whatever this is or could be. It scares the hell out of me, but I want it. Maya set down her letter and moved closer until she was sitting in his lap, her forehead resting against his. I want it too. Even though I have no idea how to do this, how to date someone when I work insane hours, how to be part of Zoe's life without overstepping, how to let you in when I've spent years keeping everyone out. We'll figure it out, Logan said, his hands settling on her waist. No rule book, no timeline, just honest and messy and real. She kissed him then, soft at first, tentative, then deeper as 5 years of loneliness and fear dissolved into something that felt like possibility. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Maya was smiling through tears. That was better than terrible pizza. High praise. The highest. They spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, the kind of deep conversation that only happened when people decided to stop protecting themselves. Maya told him about her mother's death, how she'd been 20 and studying for finals when the call came, how she'd never gotten to say goodbye, how she'd chosen hospice nursing because she wanted to give other people what she'd been denied. Time to prepare, to say the necessary things, to die surrounded by love instead of alone. Logan told her about Natalie, about the guilt he'd carried for years because he'd been the one driving that night, even though the accident wasn't his fault. How he'd promised her dying body that he'd take care of their daughter, and how that promise had become both his purpose and his prison. Do you think you could love someone else? Maya asked, carefully. Or is part of you always going to be with her? Logan considered the question honestly. I think part of me will always love who we were together, but that doesn't mean there's no room for someone new. Love isn't finite, Maya. And honestly, I don't think what I felt for Natalie and what I'm starting to feel for you are even the same thing. We were kids. We thought we had forever. This, what we're building, it's different, more aware, more grateful maybe, because we both know how quickly things can end. So we're building something on the foundation of mutual trauma and an elderly woman's matchmaking? Sounds about right. Maya laughed, and the sound filled her depressing apartment with something that felt like hope. The following weeks fell into a new rhythm. Logan and Maya saw each other when her schedule allowed, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just for late-night phone calls when she needed to hear a voice that wasn't talking about death. Zoe warmed to Maya quickly, appreciating her directness and her willingness to answer difficult questions without condescension. But it wasn't seamless. Maya's work remained demanding and unpredictable. She'd cancel plans because a patient was actively dying and needed her. She'd show up at Logan's house at midnight, exhausted and emotionally wrecked, needing someone to just hold her while she processed another loss. Logan learned to read her moods, to know when she needed conversation and when she needed silence. And Logan had his own struggles. Letting someone into his carefully controlled life meant surrendering some control. It meant Zoe getting attached to someone who might not stay. It meant risking his heart again after he'd convinced himself that risk was too dangerous. 3 weeks after the funeral, they had their first real fight. Maya had promised to come to Zoe's school play, a production of some simplified fairy tale where Zoe played a talking tree. She'd been excited about it for weeks, had mentioned it multiple times, and Maya had promised she'd be there. But the day of the play, Logan got a text. Maya, I'm so sorry. Patient emergency. Mrs. Patterson is declining rapidly and her family is falling apart. I can't leave. Please tell Zoe I'm sorry. Logan stared at the message, understanding warring with disappointment. He got it. Of course he got it. Maya's work was important and people were dying, and that took precedence over an elementary school play. But he also thought about Zoe's face when she'd asked that morning if Maya was coming, the cautious hope in her eyes. He texted back, "Okay. Hope everything's all right with your patient." The play was charming in the way school plays always were. Kids forgetting lines, elaborate cardboard sets, proud parents filming on phones. Zoe was perfect as a talking tree, delivering her 3 lines with impressive gravitas. But Logan saw her scanning the audience during curtain call, looking for Maya's face, and the small moment of disappointment when she didn't find it cut him deeper than he'd expected. That night, after Zoe was in bed, Maya called. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I know I promised. I know Zoe was counting on me, but Mrs. Patterson was—" "I know," Logan interrupted. "I understand. People were dying. Your work is important." But Zoe was disappointed. She didn't say anything, but I could tell. And I need to know that this won't be a pattern, Maya. I need to know that we're not always going to come second to your work. Silence on the other end. Then, quietly, "That's not fair." "I know it's not fair. Your job is literally about life and death. But I have to protect Zoe. I can't let her get attached to someone who's always going to choose work over her." "Choose work over her?" Maya's voice went sharp. "Logan, a woman was dying. Her family needed me. I don't get to choose when people die. I don't get to schedule emergencies around elementary school plays. I'm not asking you to schedule death. I'm asking you to—" Logan stopped, unsure what he was actually asking for. "I don't know. I'm asking for something impossible, aren't I?" "Yeah, you kind of are." Maya sighed, exhaustion heavy in her voice. "I can't be 2 people, Logan. I can't be the hospice nurse who's always available for dying patients and also the partner who never misses important moments. Something's going to give, and I need to know if you can handle that." "Can you?" Logan shot back. "Can you handle being with someone who needs reliability? Someone who has a kid who needs stability?" The question hung between them, sharp and dangerous. "I don't know," Maya admitted. "I want to say yes. I want to say I can balance everything perfectly and never let anyone down. But the truth is, my work will always be demanding. There will always be emergencies. And if you need someone who can promise to show up 100% of the time, I'm not that person." Logan felt panic rising. This was it, the moment where reality crashed into hope, where they both realized that wanting something wasn't enough. "So what are we doing here?" he asked quietly. "If we can't figure this out, what's the point?" "I don't know," Maya said again, and she sounded as lost as he felt. "Maybe Mrs. Huang was wrong. Maybe we're too broken, too different. Maybe 2 people who've built their lives around avoiding risk can't suddenly learn how to take them." "Don't say that." "Hey, why not? It's true, isn't it? You're scared I'll hurt Zoe. I'm scared I can't be what you need. We're both just—" "Maya, stop." Logan gripped the phone harder. "We're having our first fight. That's all this is. First fight, not the end." "How do you know?" "Because I'm not ready to give up yet. Are you?" A long pause, then, "No, I'm not ready either." They talked for another hour, really talked, working through the hurt and fear, acknowledging that this was hard and would probably stay hard, but that didn't mean it wasn't worth trying. By the end of the call, they'd agreed to have dinner that weekend to actually discuss expectations and boundaries, instead of just hoping everything would work out. "I'll make it up to Zoe," Maya promised. "I'll take her somewhere special, just the 2 of us. Let her choose." She'd like that. "And Logan, I am sorry. About the play, about disappointing her, about all of it. I know. We'll figure this out. Promise?" "Promise." Saturday evening, Logan dropped Zoe at Maya's apartment. A first, leaving his daughter alone with Maya, trusting her in a way that felt monumental. Zoe had chosen to go to the Science Museum, and Maya had enthusiastically agreed despite probably wanting to sleep after a 60-hour work week. "You 2 have fun," Logan said, kissing Zoe's forehead. "Be good." "I'm always good," Zoe protested. "That's debatable." He watched them drive away, his daughter and the woman he was falling for, and felt terrified and hopeful in equal measure. They returned 4 hours later, both talking excitedly about exhibits and experiments, and Logan saw genuine joy on Maya's face, the kind that had nothing to do with work or death or obligation. After Zoe went to bed, Maya stayed, and they sat on the couch with wine, finally having the conversation they'd been avoiding. "I can't promise I'll never miss things," Maya started. "My work doesn't allow for guarantees, but I can promise I'll always try. That you and Zoe matter to me, that I want to be here, that I'm not just going through the motions. And I can promise to try to understand when work comes up," Logan countered, "to not make you feel guilty for having a demanding job. But I also need you to understand that Zoe's already lost one mother. I can't let her lose another person she cares about because work always comes first. I get that. And I'm not asking to replace her mother or to become her primary parent. I'm just asking for space to be part of her life without the pressure of perfection." They negotiated like adults, setting expectations about communication, about understanding each other's limitations, about being honest when things felt overwhelming. It wasn't romantic, but it was real. And by the end of the conversation, Logan felt like they'd actually built something solid instead of just hoping for the best. "Can I tell you something that's probably too much, too soon?" Maya asked as she was leaving. "Go ahead. I'm falling in love with you, with both of you, really. Zoe is incredible, and you're exactly what Mrs. Huang said. Someone who builds things, who takes broken pieces and makes them whole. And I want to be part of what you're building, even though it scares me, even though I might mess it up." Logan pulled her close, his heart hammering. "I'm falling in love with you too. Have been since the cafe, probably, since you showed up in scrubs and admitted your job breaks your heart regularly. You're real, Maya. That's what I need. Not perfect, just real." She kissed him, soft and sweet and full of promise, then pulled back with a smile. Mrs. Huang would be so smug right now. She really would. Think she's watching from wherever dead people go? Definitely. Probably organizing it too. Maya laughed, and Logan kissed her again, grateful for meddling elderly women and second chances, and the terrifying possibility that broken people could build something beautiful together. The weeks turned into months. Halloween came, and Maya dressed up as a witch to take Zoe trick-or-treating, while Logan handed out candy and fielded questions from neighbors about his girlfriend, a label that felt both insufficient and exactly right. Thanksgiving arrived, and Maya joined them at Rachel's house, surviving his sister's enthusiastic interrogation with grace and humor. But it was the week before Christmas when everything changed. Logan was working late in his shop, finishing a commissioned piece, when his phone rang. Maya's number, but when he answered, it wasn't her voice. "Mr. Reed, this is Dr. Morrison from Mercy Hospital. I'm calling about Maya Collins. She's been in an accident." The world stopped. Logan's vision tunneled, his breath caught, and suddenly he was back 5 years ago, getting a similar call about Natalie. She's alive. Stable, but injured. A car hit her as she was leaving a patient's house. She's asking for you. Logan barely remembered the drive to the hospital, barely remembered asking Rachel to come stay with Zoe, barely remembered anything except the terror that he was going to lose her, that he'd finally opened himself to love again only to have it ripped away. He found her in the ER, bruised and bandaged but conscious, her left arm in a temporary sling. "Hey," she said weakly when she saw him. "So this is dramatic." Logan couldn't speak. He just pulled a chair to her bedside and took her uninjured hand, holding on like she might disappear if he let go. "Broken arm, some bruising, mild concussion," Maya continued, her voice a little slurred from pain medication. The other driver ran a red light. "Sound familiar?" "Don't," Logan managed. "Don't joke about this." "I have to joke about it. If I don't joke, I'll start thinking about how close I came to dying, and then I'll remember all the times I've watched other people die from car accidents, and then I'll have a full panic attack in the emergency room, which would be very unprofessional." Logan pressed his forehead against their joined hands. "I thought I lost you. I got the call, and I thought... I know. I'm sorry. I'm okay, though. I promise I'm okay." They sat like that until the doctors came to move her to a room for overnight observation, and Logan refused to leave, calling Rachel to explain and to check on Zoe, who'd been told Aunt Maya had a small accident but was fine. In the quiet hospital room with monitors beeping and nurses checking vitals every few hours, Maya and Logan had the conversation neither of them had wanted to have. "This is what you were afraid of, isn't it?" Maya asked in the dark hours before dawn. "That you'd love someone again and lose them. That Zoe would get attached and then have to grieve." "Yes. And now it almost happened, and you're probably rethinking this whole thing." Logan looked at her, bruised, bandaged, vulnerable in a way she rarely allowed, and felt certainty settle over him like a blanket. "No," he said firmly. "I'm not rethinking anything. If anything, this made me more sure." "How does that make sense?" "Because when I got the call, my first thought wasn't, 'See, this is why I don't let people in.' It was, 'I need to get to her.' You being hurt didn't make me want to run. It made me want to stay. Made me realize that loving you is worth the risk of losing you, because the alternative is a half-life. And I'm done with half-lives." Maya's eyes filled with tears. "Mrs. Huang really did a number on us, didn't she?" "Yeah, she really did." "I love you," Maya whispered. "I know I said it before, but I need you to know I mean it, completely, even though it's terrifying. I love you too, and we're going to figure this out. Your crazy work schedule, my overprotective parenting, all of it. Because that's what people who love each other do. They figure it out. Promise?" "Promise." As dawn broke over the hospital, painting the room in shades of pink and gold, Logan held Maya's hand and thought about Mrs. Huang's letter, about choosing life over survival, about building something beautiful with the time they had. And he chose. Finally, completely, terrifyingly, he chose to live. Maya was released from the hospital the next afternoon with strict instructions to rest, keep the arm immobilized, and avoid work for at least 2 weeks. The last instruction made her laugh, a bitter sound that told Logan exactly how likely she was to follow it. 2 weeks, she repeated to the discharge nurse. "Right, because my patients will just pause their dying until I'm feeling better." "Maya," Logan started, I know, doctor's orders, but I have 3 active patients who are in their final days, and they need continuity of care, and you have colleagues who can cover," Logan interrupted gently. "That's why there's a team, remember? So one person doesn't have to carry everything." Maya looked at him with something between gratitude and frustration. "I hate when you're reasonable." "I know. It's very annoying." He drove her to his house instead of her apartment, a decision they'd made in the early morning hours when it became clear she couldn't manage alone with one arm. Zoe had prepared for Maya's arrival with the intensity of a general planning a military operation, setting up the guest room with extra pillows, her favorite stuffed animals for company, and a carefully drawn "Get Well Soon" card that featured what appeared to be a stick figure, Maya surrounded by hearts. "The hearts are because we love you," Zoe explained seriously when Maya saw it. "And you're smiling in the picture because you're not dead, which is good." "Zoe," Logan said, mortified, but Maya was laughing, real laughter that seemed to surprise even her. "That's the best get well card I've ever received." "Thank you, sweetheart." Zoe beamed, then immediately launched into a detailed explanation of the care plan she'd developed, which included hourly check-ins, unlimited access to the television remote, and something called healing cookies that she and Rachel had apparently baked that morning. Watching his daughter fuss over Maya with such earnest concern, Logan felt something in his chest expand. This was what he'd been afraid of, Zoe getting attached, caring about someone who might leave. But seeing them together, seeing the genuine affection between them, he realized his fear had been backwards. The risk wasn't that Zoe would get hurt. The risk was teaching her that avoiding connection was safer than embracing it. The first few days were an adjustment. Maya was a terrible patient, restless, guilty about missing work, checking her phone obsessively for updates on her patients. She'd get notifications from colleagues covering her cases and would spiral into anxiety about whether they were managing medications correctly, whether families were getting the support they needed. "Mrs. Patterson died this morning," she told Logan on day 3, staring at her phone with tears streaming down her face. "I wasn't there. I should have been there." Logan sat beside her on the couch, pulling her carefully against his chest, mindful of her injured arm. "You were in a hospital bed with a concussion. You couldn't have been there. But she asked for me. According to Sarah, that's the nurse covering, Mrs. Patterson kept asking when I was coming back. And then she died, and I wasn't there, and her daughter probably thinks I abandoned them. Did Sarah explain what happened? That you were injured? Yes, but that doesn't change the fact that I promised Mrs. Patterson I'd be there, and I broke that promise. Logan felt the weight of her guilt, understood it in a way most people probably couldn't. He'd carried his own guilt for 5 years. Guilt that he'd been driving when Natalie died, that he'd survived when she hadn't, that Zoe would grow up without a mother because of circumstances beyond anyone's control. Listen to me, he said firmly. You did not abandon Mrs. Patterson. You were hit by a car while leaving another patient's house. You were injured doing your job, being there for someone else. That's not abandonment. That's being human. It feels like abandonment. I know, but feelings aren't always facts. He'd learned that in grief counseling, one of the few useful things the therapist had said. You can feel guilty and still recognize that you did nothing wrong. Maya leaned into him, exhausted from carrying everyone else's deaths, and now her own trauma. How do you do this? How do you get up every day and be a good father and run a business and not fall apart? Who says I don't fall apart? I just do it quietly, usually in my workshop at 2 in the morning while sanding furniture that doesn't need to be sanded. That's depressing. Welcome to functional adulthood. She laughed despite the tears, and Logan felt grateful that he could offer her this. A place to fall apart. Someone who understood that strength wasn't about never breaking, but about breaking in safe company. Zoe helped in her own way, sitting with Maya in the afternoons after school, reading aloud from her chapter books, or showing her the latest science experiment. One evening, Logan walked into the living room to find them having what appeared to be a very serious conversation. But what if you love someone and they die? Zoe was asking. Then you're just sad forever. Logan froze in the doorway, unsure whether to interrupt. Maya considered the question with the same seriousness she'd give an adult. You're sad for a while, yes, but the love doesn't disappear just because the person is gone. It stays with you. And eventually the sadness gets smaller, and what's left is gratitude that you got to love them at all. Is that what happened with your mom? Yeah, I was really sad when she died. I'm still sad sometimes, but mostly I'm grateful I had her for 20 years, and I try to live in a way that would make her proud. Zoe thought about this, her small face serious. Do you think my mom would be proud of my dad? For being a good dad even though he's sad sometimes? Maya glanced up and saw Logan watching from the doorway. Their eyes met, and he saw understanding there, compassion. I think your mom would be incredibly proud of both of you, Maya said softly. Your dad is one of the best men I've ever met, and you're smart and kind and brave. That's a pretty amazing legacy. Logan had to walk away before Zoe saw him crying. He stood in his workshop, surrounded by half-finished furniture and the tools Mrs. Huang had left him, and let himself feel the full weight of the past 5 years, the grief, the loneliness, the constant fear that he was failing Zoe by not being enough. And then he let himself feel something else. Hope. The possibility that maybe he was enough after all, that maybe loving Maya and letting her love them back wasn't a risk but a gift. By the end of the first week, Maya was going stir-crazy. Her arm was healing, the concussion symptoms had mostly resolved, and she was desperate to return to work despite the doctor's orders for another week of rest. I could just do paperwork, she argued over breakfast. Light duty. I wouldn't be lifting anything or doing physical care. No, Logan said firmly. You're not the boss of me. No, but I am someone who cares about you and doesn't want you to hurt yourself by rushing back too soon. Zoe looked up from her cereal. Maya, you're being stubborn. Dad says stubborn people end up more hurt because they don't listen to their bodies. Whose side are you on? Maya asked, but she was smiling. The side of science and medical professionals who know better than you, Zoe replied primly. Logan caught Maya's eye across the table and saw her expression soften with affection. For Zoe, for this makeshift family they were becoming, for the life that was building around them without permission. Fine, Maya conceded. 1 more week, but I'm going to be insufferable about it. We're prepared, Logan assured her. That afternoon, while Zoe was at a friend's house, Logan and Maya sat on his back porch overlooking the lake. It was early January now, the water gray and choppy, the trees bare. Not beautiful in the conventional sense, but honest. Real. "I've been thinking," Maya said carefully, "about what happens when I go back to work, about where I live and where you live and what makes sense." Logan's heart rate picked up. "Okay. My apartment is depressing and 30 minutes from here. Your house is beautiful and has space and feels like an actual home, and I spend most of my time here anyway, even before the accident." "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Maya turned to face him fully. "I'm saying that when my lease is up in March, I'd like to not renew it. I'm saying I want to be here, with you and Zoe, if you'll have me. Not as a guest or temporary fixture, but as someone who belongs here." Logan felt tears prick his eyes. "You're asking to move in." "I'm asking if you want me to move in. There's a difference. I don't want to pressure you or rush things or make Zoe uncomfortable, but I also don't want to keep pretending that my apartment is my home when my home is wherever you two are." He kissed her then, deep and thorough, trying to communicate everything he felt, the fear, the hope, the absolute certainty that this was right. "Yes," he said when they finally broke apart. "Move in. Make this your home. We want you here. You should probably check with Zoe first. I already know what she'll say. She asked me last week if you were going to live with us forever. I told her we'd have to see, but I think she was hoping for a yes." Maya laughed, wiping her eyes. "We're really doing this. Building a life together, being a family. We really are." Mrs. Huang would be unbearably smug. She'd have opinions about furniture arrangement and probably insist we paint the guest room a color called optimistic yellow or something equally horrifying. She absolutely would. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the winter lake, and Logan thought about how much had changed since that afternoon in the cafe. How he'd been so certain that survival was enough, that safety mattered more than possibility. And now here he was, planning a future with a woman he'd known less than 6 months, inviting her into his home and his daughter's life, choosing hope over fear. When Zoe came home that evening, they told her together. Maya would be moving in when her lease ended, would be part of their daily lives in a permanent way. Zoe's response was typically direct, "Does this mean you're getting married?" Logan choked on his water. That's a different conversation. "But you love each other, right? And you're going to live together, so marriage seems like the next logical step." "Zoe, sweetie, relationships don't always follow a precise timeline," Maya said, clearly trying not to laugh at Logan's discomfort. "Why not? If you know you want to be together forever, why wait?" It was a fair question, delivered with the brutal honesty of childhood. Logan looked at Maya and saw his own thoughts reflected in her expression. Why were they waiting? Not for marriage necessarily, but for the commitment it represented. They'd both already decided. They'd both chosen each other. Everything else was just logistics. "You're right," Logan said slowly. "If we know, and I know." Maya's eyes widened. "Logan, I'm not proposing right now, in front of my 7-year-old daughter, while you're still recovering from a car accident. I have some sense of romantic timing, but Zoe's right. I love you. I want to build a life with you, and when the time is right, I'm going to ask you to marry me, and I really hope you'll say yes." The room went very quiet. Zoe watched them both with bright, curious eyes. Maya stared at Logan like he'd just offered her something she'd convinced herself she didn't deserve. "I'll say yes," she whispered. "Whenever you ask. However you ask. The answer is yes." Zoe whooped with delight and immediately launched into planning a wedding that apparently involved at least 100 flowers and definitely a chocolate fountain, while Logan and Maya held hands across the table and grinned at each other like idiots. Maya returned to work the following week, easing back into her schedule with modified duties that kept her from the most physically demanding aspects of patient care. It was hard for her. Logan could see the struggle in her face each evening when she came home, the guilt over not being able to do everything, the frustration with her healing body's limitations. But she was trying to ask for help, to trust her colleagues, to accept that she didn't have to carry every patient's death alone. And Logan was learning too, learning to give her space when she needed to process, learning to recognize when she needed comfort versus when she needed to talk through medical details he barely understood. They fought sometimes, about her working too much, about his overprotectiveness, about the dishwasher loading technique and whether Zoe needed a later bedtime. Normal couple fights, the kind that ended in apologies and compromise rather than walls and silence. One evening in late February, Logan was working in his shop when Maya appeared in the doorway, still in her scrubs, looking exhausted but lighter somehow. "Hey," she said. "Got a minute?" "Always." He set down the sandpaper he'd been using. "Rough day?" "Actually, no. Good day. Really good day." She came closer, and Logan saw tears in her eyes. Happy tears, he thought. Mr. Chen died this afternoon, 92 years old, surrounded by 4 generations of family, peaceful as anything. And right before he went, he looked at me and said, "Thank you for teaching my family how to let me go." And I realized that's what I do, Logan, not just manage symptoms or dispense medication. I help families learn how to love each other through the worst thing they'll ever face. And that's worth the hard days. That's worth carrying the grief. Logan pulled her into his arms, and she melted against him. Mrs. Huang would be proud of you for figuring that out. She would probably say she knew it all along, and why did it take me so long to catch up? That sounds exactly like her. They stood like that for a long while, surrounded by sawdust and unfinished furniture, and Logan thought about the letters Mrs. Huang had left them, about building instead of hiding, about choosing life over survival. They were doing it, messily, imperfectly, but genuinely. They were building something beautiful. March arrived with the kind of weather that couldn't decide if it was still winter or ready for spring, cold mornings giving way to warm afternoons, the lake ice finally breaking up, the first brave flowers pushing through still frozen ground. Maya's lease ended and Rachel organized a moving party that involved entirely too much wine and not enough actual moving help. "I can't believe you're shacking up with my brother," Rachel said, directing movers with the authority of someone who'd clearly done this before. "He's been emotionally constipated for 5 years, and you just walked in and unclogged everything." "That's a terrible metaphor," Logan protested. "But accurate," Maya said, laughing. By evening, Maya's belongings were integrated into the house, her books on the shelves, her clothes in the closet, her coffee mug in the cabinet. Small changes that added up to something monumental. She lived here now. This was home. That night, after Zoe was asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Logan and Maya stood in the bedroom that was now officially theirs and felt the weight of the moment. "I'm terrified," Maya admitted. "What if I mess this up? What if my work schedule destroys us? What if Zoe decides she doesn't want me here after all?" "Then we'll figure it out," Logan said, echoing the promise they'd made to each other months ago. "We'll fight and compromise and probably drive each other crazy sometimes. But we'll figure it out because that's what people who love each other do." "When did you become so wise?" "When a dying woman forced me to have coffee with her hospice nurse." Maya smiled, but it was edged with sadness. "I wish she could see this, see what her meddling created." "Maybe she can. Maybe she's wherever dead people go, organizing the afterlife and feeling incredibly smug about her matchmaking skills. Definitely organizing it, probably has the angels on a strict schedule." They got into bed. Their bed, in their house, in their life. And Logan felt peace settle over him like a blanket. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of something stronger. Love. Commitment. The choice to build instead of hide. The weeks that followed found their rhythm. Maya's schedule remained chaotic, but they learned to work around it. Logan took on more of the morning routine with Zoe, and Maya handled evenings when she could. They had family dinners when possible and grab moments when they could, coffee together before dawn, stolen kisses in the hallway, late-night conversations when Maya came home from difficult cases. Zoe thrived with the stability of it, the knowledge that Maya wasn't just visiting, but staying. She started calling Maya by her first name without the hesitation that had marked their earlier interactions, started including her in school projects and bedtime routines, started treating her not like a guest, but like family. One evening in April, Logan was helping Zoe with homework when she asked, with the casualness that marked deeply important questions, "If you marry Maya, will she be my mom?" Logan set down his pencil carefully. "That's up to you, sweetheart. Maya could never replace your birth mom, and she wouldn't want to. But if we get married, she'd be your stepmom, which is a different kind of mom, but still important. Would I call her mom? Only if you wanted to. You could keep calling her Maya, or come up with something else. There's no rules. Zoe considered this, chewing on her eraser. I think I'd like to call her Maya Mom, so I remember she's both. Logan's throat tightened. I think she'd really like that. Good. Are you going to ask her soon to marry you? Maybe. Why, are you getting impatient? Kind of. I want to be a flower girl, and I'm not getting any younger. Logan laughed and pulled her into a hug. You're 7. Exactly, practically ancient. That night, after Zoe was in bed, Logan told Maya about the conversation. She cried, happy tears mixed with overwhelmed tears, and Logan held her while she processed the magnitude of a child choosing to claim her as family. I never thought I'd have this, Maya whispered. A family, a home, someone else's child calling me any version of mom. I thought I'd be alone forever, that my work would be my only relationship. Mrs. Huang knew better. She really did. 2 weeks later, on a Sunday morning when the world felt quiet and possible, Logan took Maya and Zoe to the lake. The same path where he and Maya had first walked, where they'd confessed their fears and hopes, where they'd started building something neither of them had thought possible. He'd planned it carefully, asked Rachel to meet them there with a picnic arranged for flowers, even bought a ring that he'd been carrying in his pocket for a week, waiting for the right moment. But when the moment came, all the planning fell away, and it was just the 3 of them by the water, with the morning sun turning everything gold. Maya, Logan said, taking her hand while Zoe watched with barely contained excitement. 6 months ago, I was just surviving, going through the motions, raising my daughter, keeping my world small and safe and painfully lonely. And then Mrs. Huang forced me to have coffee with you, and you showed up late in scrubs, exhausted and honest, and you didn't know it, but you changed everything. Maya was already crying, her free hand pressed to her mouth. You taught me that survival and living are different things, that love is worth the risk, that broken people can build beautiful things together. And I love you, not despite the complications, but because of them, because you're real and flawed and trying just like me. So I'm asking, here in the place where we first started figuring this out, with our daughter watching, will you marry me? He pulled out the ring, simple, beautiful, exactly right, and Maya was nodding before he even finished the question. Yes. Yes, absolutely yes. Zoe shrieked with delight and threw herself at both of them, and they collapsed into a laughing, crying heap on the grass while Rachel captured photos from a discreet distance. The ring fit perfectly. Logan had secretly borrowed one of Maya's rings to get the size right, and she kept looking at it like she couldn't quite believe it was real. Mrs. Huang is definitely smug right now, Maya said, wiping her eyes. Wherever she is, she's absolutely insufferable about being right. She earned it, Logan agreed. They had the picnic Rachel had brought, and Zoe immediately launched into wedding planning that involved increasingly elaborate ideas. Maya listened with patient amusement, occasionally catching Logan's eye with a look that said, "Can you believe this is our life now?" He could believe it. Could believe that a single father and a hospice nurse, both convinced they were too broken for love, had found each other through an elderly woman's final act of care. Could believe that risk was worth it, that opening yourself to joy meant accepting the possibility of loss. And that was okay, because the alternative was a half-life neither of them wanted anymore. As the sun rose higher and Zoe chased butterflies along the shore, and Maya leaned against his shoulder with a ring on her finger, Logan thought about Mrs. Huang's letter, about choosing life, about building something beautiful with the time they had. They were doing it, actually doing it, and it was messy and complicated and absolutely terrifying, and it was perfect. The engagement changed nothing and everything simultaneously. Maya still worked her unpredictable hospice hours. Logan still spent his days restoring furniture, and Zoe still asked impossible questions at breakfast. But underneath the ordinary routines, something fundamental had shifted. They were building towards something permanent now, making plans that extended beyond next week or next month into a future they could actually imagine together. Wedding planning, however, proved more complicated than Logan had anticipated. Maya wanted something small and meaningful. Zoe wanted something that resembled a fairy tale, and Rachel had opinions about everything from color schemes to whether they needed a DJ or a band. Logan mostly stayed out of it, content to let the women in his life debate the merits of various flower arrangements while he worked in his shop. But 3 weeks after the proposal, Maya came home from work looking more troubled than usual. Logan found her sitting on the back porch, still in her scrubs, staring at the lake with an expression he'd come to recognize, the one that meant she'd lost a patient who'd gotten under her skin. "Want to talk about it?" he asked, settling into the chair beside her. "Mrs. Patterson's daughter came to see me today," Maya said quietly. "The patient I missed when I was in the hospital, remember?" Logan nodded, remembering Maya's guilt over not being there. "She brought me flowers and a card, thanked me for everything I'd done for her mother, for helping their family navigate those final months. Said her mom talked about me constantly, how I made her feel safe, how I helped them all learn to say goodbye." Maya's voice cracked. "And I wasn't even there at the end. I failed her, and she still wanted her daughter to thank me." "You didn't fail her, Maya." "I know. Logically, I know that. But it made me think about something Mrs. Huang said in her letter, about how I carry death home with me. And I realized I'm still doing it. Even after everything, even after finding you and Zoe and building this life, I'm still letting work consume me, still feeling guilty when I'm not there, still checking my phone during dinner, still waking up at 3 in the morning, worried about patients." Logan took her hand, waiting. "I don't know how to do this," Maya continued. "How to be a hospice nurse and a partner and a stepmom and actually be present for all of it. Something's got to give, and I'm terrified it's going to be us. That I'm going to miss too many school plays and date nights and important moments because someone is dying, and dying doesn't wait for convenient timing." "So what do you want to do?" Maya looked at him, surprised. "You're not going to tell me it'll be fine, that we'll figure it out?" "I mean, we will figure it out, but that's not helpful right now. What I'm asking is, if you could design your perfect work situation, what would it look like?" She was quiet for a long moment, thinking. "Fewer patients, more time with each one. Maybe part-time instead of full-time, so I could actually have a life outside of work. But that would mean less money, and I have student loans and—" "We'll figure out the money," Logan interrupted. "I'm serious. My business is doing well, and we don't need 2 full incomes. If you want to cut back hours, we can make that work." "You do that? Support me reducing my income so I can be home more?" "Maya, I'm not supporting you reducing your income. I'm supporting you building the life you actually want instead of the one you think you're supposed to have. There's a difference." She kissed him then, deep and grateful, and when she pulled back, there were tears on her cheeks. "I love you. Have I mentioned that recently?" "Not in the last hour or so." "Well, I do. Desperately." They sat together as the sun set over the lake, making plans for a future that included boundaries and balance, and Logan felt grateful for Mrs. Huang's meddling all over again. She'd seen what they needed before they could see it themselves, not just each other, but permission to build lives that made sense for who they actually were rather than who they thought they should be. The next week, Maya had a meeting with her supervisor to discuss reducing her hours to part-time. She came home that evening looking lighter than Logan had seen her in months. "They said yes," she announced, sweeping Zoe up in a hug. "Part-time starting next month. 25 hours a week instead of 50. I'll have 3 core patients instead of 6, and I'll actually have weekends sometimes." Zoe cheered, and Logan pulled them both into his arms, feeling his chest expand with something that felt remarkably like happiness. "This means I can actually plan things," Maya said, her voice muffled against Logan's shoulder. "Like a wedding, and family dinners, and Zoe's soccer games in the fall." "I'm playing soccer in the fall?" Zoe asked. "If you want to," Maya said. "I can actually commit to being at games now. That's the point." "Can I think about it? Soccer involves a lot of running." "That's generally how soccer works, yes." Logan laughed, holding his family close, and thought about how far they'd come from that awkward coffee shop meeting. How they'd been 2 broken people convinced they were better off alone, and now they were planning soccer schedules and part-time work arrangements, and a future that included all 3 of them. As spring turned towards summer, wedding plans came together with surprising ease. They'd settled on a small ceremony in late August, just family and close friends, in the park by the lake where Logan had proposed. Simple, meaningful, exactly right. Zoe was designing her flower girl dress with Rachel's help, which apparently required extensive sketching and fabric swatches and serious discussions about whether tulle was too basic. But in early June, Logan got a call that disrupted everything. "Mr. Reed, this is Jennifer Caldwell from Caldwell and Associates. I'm calling regarding your daughter Zoe." Logan's blood ran cold. What about her? "I represent Natalie Henderson's parents. They've asked me to contact you regarding visitation rights with their granddaughter." The world tilted. Natalie's parents, Margaret and Robert Henderson, had been distant figures in Zoe's life. They'd sent cards on birthdays and Christmas, called occasionally, but they'd never pushed for more involvement. Logan had assumed they'd made peace with the situation, with him raising Zoe alone. "Visitation rights?" Logan repeated, his voice tight. "They feel they've been too passive in Zoe's life and would like to establish a regular visitation schedule. They're hoping to avoid legal action, but they're prepared to pursue grandparents' rights if necessary." Logan ended the call with promises to consult his own attorney and sat in his workshop, hands shaking, feeling like the ground had just opened beneath him. Natalie's parents wanting to be involved in Zoe's life wasn't inherently bad. She deserved to know her maternal grandparents, but the timing, the legal threats, the way it felt like an attack on the family he'd built, it all triggered every protective instinct he had. When Maya came home that evening, she found him still in the workshop, staring at nothing. "Logan, what's wrong?" He told her everything, the call, the threats of legal action, his fear that the Hendersons would try to take Zoe away or disrupt their lives just as everything was finally stable. Maya listened without interrupting, then sat beside him on the workshop floor, taking his hand. "Okay. First, they can't take Zoe away. You're her father, you've been raising her alone for 7 years, and by all accounts, you're doing an excellent job. Grandparents' rights are real, but they're limited. Second, maybe this isn't an attack. Maybe they're genuinely trying to be part of her life and just going about it badly. By threatening legal action? By having their lawyer call instead of calling themselves, which suggests they're scared too. Scared you'll say no, scared they've waited too long, scared of being rejected." Maya squeezed his hand. "You know what I think you should do? Call them, directly. Have an actual conversation instead of letting lawyers translate everything." Logan wanted to argue, but he knew she was right. He'd been avoiding the Hendersons for years, keeping them at arm's length because maintaining distance felt safer than risking connection. But that was the old Logan, the one who chose survival over living. The next day, he called Margaret Henderson. "Logan," she answered, her voice thick with emotion. "I was hoping you'd call. Your lawyer said you want visitation rights." "We want to know our granddaughter," Margaret corrected gently. "We've been cowards, Logan. After Natalie died, we were so consumed by grief that we couldn't be there for you or Zoe. And then time passed, and it felt too late, like we'd missed our chance. But we're getting older, and we've been thinking about legacy, about what Natalie would want, and we can't keep being absent from our granddaughter's life." Logan heard the pain in her voice, recognized it because he'd carried the same pain for years. "Why didn't you just call me? Why involve lawyers?" "Because I was terrified you'd say no, that you'd built a life without us and wouldn't want us interfering. The lawyer was supposed to make it official, legitimate. I see now that it was the wrong approach." They talked for over an hour, really talked, for the first time since Natalie's funeral. Margaret and Robert didn't want to disrupt Zoe's life or challenge Logan's authority. They just wanted to be grandparents, to have regular visits, to build a relationship with the little girl who carried their daughter's eyes and smile. When Logan hung up, he felt exhausted, but lighter. He called Maya immediately. "I think we're going to work it out," he said. "No lawyers, no court, just actual communication. They want to visit next month, spend a weekend getting to know Zoe properly." I said yes. "How do you feel about that?" "Terrified, but also like it's the right thing. Zoe deserves to know them, and they deserve to know her. And maybe having more people who love her isn't a threat. Maybe it's just more love." "Mrs. Huang would be proud of you," Maya said softly. "Yeah, she really would." The Hendersons visited in July, and the weekend was awkward and emotional and ultimately beautiful. Margaret cried when she saw how much Zoe resembled Natalie, and Robert was quiet but warm, bringing gifts and stories about Zoe's mother as a child. Zoe was cautious at first, but warmed to them quickly, especially when Margaret showed her photos of Natalie that Logan had never seen, Natalie as a baby, as a teenager, as a young woman full of life and possibility. She was beautiful, Zoe said, studying a photo of her mother at graduation. She was, Margaret agreed, and she would have loved you so much. Logan watched from the doorway, his heart full and aching, and felt grateful for second chances, for the possibility of expanding their family instead of keeping it small and protected, for the courage to risk connection even when it was terrifying. That night, after the Hendersons had gone to their hotel and Zoe was asleep, Logan and Maya sat on the back porch with wine. That went well, Maya observed. Better than I expected. They're good people, just grieving people who didn't know how to reach out. Are you okay with all of it? Logan considered the question honestly. Yeah, I am. It's complicated, and there will probably be difficult moments as we figure out boundaries and expectations. But Zoe having grandparents who love her, that's not a bad thing. That's actually a really good thing. You've come a long way from the guy who almost walked out of that cafe. I've had help. He pulled her closer. You, Mrs. Huang, even Zoe, in her own way. Everyone kept pushing me toward life instead of letting me hide in survival mode. Well, survival mode is overrated anyway. Extremely overrated. August arrived with heat and humidity and the final countdown to the wedding. Rachel had taken over most of the logistics with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting years for this moment. Zoe's flower girl dress was complete. Tulle had been deemed acceptable after all, and Maya had found a simple dress that made her look like something out of a dream. Logan spent his evenings in the workshop, using the tools Mrs. Huang had left him to build something special. A bench for the garden, carved with both their initials and Zoe's, with the date of the wedding and a quote from Mrs. Huang's letter. Build something beautiful with the time you have. 2 days before the wedding, Logan visited Mrs. Huang's grave. It was something he did occasionally, bringing flowers and sitting on the ground, talking to her like she could hear him. We're getting married on Saturday, he told the headstone. Maya and me, with Zoe as flower girl and half the neighborhood watching because apparently Rachel invited everyone. It's going to be small and simple and exactly what we wanted. And I know you're probably wherever dead people go, feeling incredibly smug about the whole thing. The wind rustled through the cemetery trees and Logan smiled. You were right, about everything. Maya and I were both drowning, and we were so convinced we were fine that we couldn't see how not fine we actually were. But you saw it. You saw what we needed before we could see it ourselves. So thank you for meddling, for manipulating, for spending your final weeks worrying about us instead of yourself. Thank you for the letters and the setup and the gift of each other. He sat there for a while longer, feeling peace settle over him like a benediction, then drove home to his family. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect, the kind of August morning that felt designed for new beginnings. Logan woke early, too nervous to sleep, and found Maya already awake in the guest room. They'd spent the night apart at Rachel's insistence, something about tradition and anticipation. Maya. Can't sleep, too excited. Also terrified. Is it normal to be both? Logan. Completely normal. I've been awake since 5. Maya. We're really doing this. Logan. We really are. No regrets? Maya. None. You? Logan. Only that Mrs. Huang isn't here to see it. Maya. She's here. I can feel her judging my coffee consumption and telling me to eat breakfast. Logan. That sounds exactly right. By 2 o'clock, they were all gathered in the park by the lake. Maybe 40 people total, all the people who mattered. Rachel and her family, Maya's colleagues from the hospice, neighbors from Lakeview Drive, the Hendersons sitting in the front row looking proud and emotional. Zoe stood at the front in her carefully designed dress, holding a basket of flower petals and vibrating with barely contained excitement. The ceremony itself was simple. No elaborate production, no lengthy speeches, just Logan and Maya standing beneath a canopy of trees, saying the words that would bind them together legally and practically and emotionally. The officiant, A friend of Rachel's who'd gotten ordained online specifically for this occasion spoke briefly about love and risk and second chances. Then it was time for vows. Logan went first, his voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. Maya, 6 months ago, I didn't believe in second chances. I thought I'd used up my allotment of happiness, and the best I could do was survive with grace. Then you showed up late to a cafe in Scrubs, exhausted and honest, and you reminded me that survival and living are different things. You've taught me to risk again, to hope again, to build instead of hide. You've loved my daughter like she's yours, and you've loved me despite all my broken pieces. So I'm promising you this. I will show up. I will be honest even when it's hard. I will support your work and your dreams and your need for terrible expensive coffee. And I will love you, messily, imperfectly, but completely, for as long as we both live. Maya was crying openly now, mascara be damned. She took a shaky breath and began her own vows. Logan, I spent years believing that my work was my only relationship, that helping people die with dignity meant I didn't deserve to live fully myself. I convinced myself that loneliness was just the cost of my career, that connection was a luxury I couldn't afford. And then Mrs. Huang, bless her meddling soul, forced us together, and you showed me what I'd been missing. You build things, Logan. You take broken furniture and make it whole again. And somehow, you've been doing the same thing for me. You've given me a home, a family, a reason to leave work at work and actually live. So I'm promising you this. I will keep showing up, even when work is demanding, even when it's hard. I will love Zoe fiercely and honestly. I will let you help me carry the weight instead of insisting I can do everything alone. And I will love you with all my complicated, damaged heart for the rest of our lives. Although there wasn't a dry eye in the audience, even Robert Henderson was wiping his face with a handkerchief. They exchanged rings, simple bands that matched the engagement ring Logan had chosen, and the officiant pronounced them married with a grin. You may now kiss your bride, and let's all remember that Mrs. Huang made this happen from beyond the grave, so someone should pour one out for her later. Laughter rippled through the crowd, and Logan kissed Maya thoroughly, both of them smiling too hard to make it properly romantic, but nobody cared. Zoe threw flower petals everywhere with enthusiastic abandon, and the small gathering erupted in applause. The reception was held right there in the park, picnic tables covered in mismatched tablecloths, food from everyone's favorite local restaurants, music playing from someone's Bluetooth speaker. Nothing fancy, nothing perfect, but absolutely right. Logan watched Maya dance with Zoe to some pop song he didn't recognize, both of them laughing, and felt his heart physically ache with happiness. Rachel appeared beside him with champagne. You did good, little brother. I got lucky. You got meddled with by a dying woman who saw what you needed before you did. But yeah, also lucky. Rachel clinked her glass against his. To Mrs. Huang. May she rest in peace and continue to interfere in people's lives from whatever afterlife accepts bossy elderly ladies. To Mrs. Huang, Logan echoed. The afternoon blurred into evening, toasts and laughter, Zoe falling asleep on a blanket while the adults continued celebrating, Maya's colleagues sharing hospice stories that were somehow both heartbreaking and hilarious, the Hendersons looking more relaxed than Logan had ever seen them. As the sun set, painting the lake in shades of orange and pink, Logan found Maya standing by the water, looking out at the view. Hey, wife, he said, slipping his arms around her waist from behind. Hey, husband. She leaned back against him. We did it. We really did. Think Mrs. Huang would approve? I think Mrs. Huang is wherever dead people go, organizing the entire afterlife and feeling incredibly smug about her matchmaking skills. Maya laughed. She earned the smugness. They stood together as the party continued behind them, as their friends and family celebrated this new chapter, as the world kept turning exactly as it always had, and yet somehow completely different. I'm happy, Maya said wonderingly. Actually, genuinely happy. When's the last time you could say that? Logan thought about it. Maybe never. Not like this. Not this fully. Mrs. Huang was right about all of it. Love is worth the risk. Building is better than hiding. Life is short and precious and meant to be lived fully, not carefully. She was annoyingly right about everything. The best people usually are. They returned to the party eventually, to cutting the cake Zoe had insisted needed at least 3 layers, and dancing to songs that ranged from romantic to ridiculous, to saying goodbye to guests as the evening wound down. The Hendersons were among the last to leave, and Margaret pulled Logan into a tight hug. "Natalie would be happy for you," she whispered. "She'd want you to be loved, to build this beautiful life. Don't ever doubt that." "Thank you," Logan managed, his throat tight. "And Maya," Margaret turned to her new daughter-in-law. "Thank you for loving them both, for being patient with an old woman who's still learning how to be a grandmother, for making space for us in your family." "You're Zoe's grandparents," Maya said simply. "That means your family, always." After everyone had gone and Zoe was asleep in Rachel's guest room, they were staying there for the night while Logan and Maya had the house to themselves. They drove home in comfortable silence, rings catching the streetlights, hearts full to bursting. Inside their house, they stood in the kitchen where they'd had so many conversations, where they'd fought and made up and planned their future, and Logan pulled Maya close. "Thank you," he said, "for saying yes to coffee with a stranger, for moving in, for loving Zoe, for marrying me despite knowing all my broken pieces. Thank you for building me a bench with Mrs. Huang's quote carved into it and hiding it in the garden until today so I'd cry during the ceremony. You noticed that?" "Of course I noticed. It's beautiful, Logan. Everything today was beautiful." They made their way to the bedroom, to the life they'd built together, to the future that stretched out before them full of possibility and risk and the terrifying beauty of actual living. And somewhere, in whatever afterlife accepted meddling elderly women who saw what people needed before they knew themselves, Mrs. Huang smiled. She'd done it. Taken 2 broken people convinced they were better off alone and forced them together, manipulated them into coffee dates and honest conversations, and the courage to risk connection. She'd spent her final weeks worrying about the living instead of herself. And it had worked. Logan Reed and Maya Collins were married now, building a family, choosing life over survival with every difficult, beautiful, messy day. Mrs. Huang's final act of love had become their new beginning, and it was absolutely worth every bit of meddling it took to get there. The next morning, Logan woke to find Maya already awake, watching him with a soft smile. "Good morning, husband." "Good morning, wife." He pulled her closer. "How does it feel, being married?" "Exactly the same as yesterday, but with better legal benefits and shared health insurance." "So romantic." "I'm a delight." They lay there as morning light filtered through the curtains, and Logan thought about the journey that had brought them here. From strangers at a cafe to this moment, married and building a life that included both their scars and their hopes. "Do you think we'll mess this up?" Maya asked quietly. "Eventually." "Probably. We'll fight and hurt each other and make mistakes, but we'll also apologize and compromise and keep choosing each other. That's what Mrs. Huang taught us, right? That love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up, being honest, and building something beautiful even when it's hard." "When did you become so wise?" "When a dying woman forced me to have coffee with her hospice nurse." Maya laughed and kissed him, and Logan felt grateful for second chances, for meddling neighbors, for the courage to risk his heart again, for this woman who'd reminded him that survival and living were different things. They had breakfast together, called to check on Zoe at Rachel's, made plans for a small honeymoon the following month when Maya's work schedule allowed. Normal married couple things, mundane and perfect. That afternoon, they picked up Zoe and went to the cemetery to visit Mrs. Huang's grave. Zoe brought fresh flowers, and Maya brought a photo from the wedding, all 3 of them together, smiling like their hearts might burst. "We wanted to show you," Maya said to the headstone, setting the photo against it gently. "We did it. We got married, and it was beautiful, and you were absolutely right about everything. So thank you for seeing what we couldn't see, for caring enough to meddle, for giving us each other." Logan added his own thanks, and Zoe carefully arranged the flowers, talking to Mrs. Huang like she was still there to listen. As they walked back to the car, Zoe between them holding both their hands, Logan felt peace settle over him like a benediction. This was it. The life he'd been too afraid to want, the family he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve, the love he'd thought was too risky to pursue. Mrs. Huang had seen it all before he could, had orchestrated their meeting, had spent her dying weeks pushing them toward each other because she understood what they needed better than they understood themselves. And now here they were, Logan, Maya, and Zoe, a family built on grief and second chances and an elderly woman's final gift. It was messy and complicated and absolutely beautiful. And they were living, actually fully living, for the first time in years. That evening, as the sun set over the lake, and Zoe played in the yard and Maya sat beside him on the bench he'd built with Mrs. Huang's quote carved into the wood, Logan Reed finally understood what the old woman had been trying to teach him. Life was short. Love was risky. Building something beautiful required courage and honesty and the willingness to let people in even when it terrified you. But the alternative, the safe, careful, controlled existence he'd been living, wasn't really living at all. It was just surviving. And he was done with survival. He was ready to live. They all were. Together.